Welcome to the AlphaWarrior Show. We're excited to share diverse perspectives and expert insights with you. Please note that the views and information expressed by our guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of the AlphaWarrior Show, its management, or our partners. Each of our affiliates and sponsors and partnerships is a separate entity, and their opinions are their own. Today's content is provided for information and educational purposes and should not be taken as specific advice, whether it be financial, medical, or legal. While we strive to present accurate and useful information, we cannot guarantee its completeness or relevance to your specific situation. We provide all information as is and encourage you to consult with a professional advisor to address your specific individual needs. Your use of any information from this broadcast is entirely at your own risk. By listening further, you agree to identify and protect the AlphaWarrior Show and its associates from any claims or damages arising from your use of this broadcast content. Changes to this disclaimer may be made at any time and will be done effectively immediately upon posting or broadcasting. Thank you for tuning in, and we hope you find the episode both informative and thought-provoking. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to the next generation of warfare, psychological warfare. In modern conflict, the mind is a potent weapon. Discover General Michael T. Flynn's groundbreaking guide, A Citizen's Guide to Fifth Generation Warfare. Unlock tactics, strategies, and the mindset to navigate this cognitive battlefield that we all find ourselves in. Equip yourself against manipulation and emerge unscathed. Unleash your potential. Order now.
How's it going, ladies and gentlemen? A few minutes behind the clock. Little technical difficulties and figuring something out. And just right now, while the intro was playing, I'm in a group message with Absolute 1776 and CanCon, and they just sent me something. Holy shit. I'm going to bring it up on the screen right here in a few seconds. But you guys are wondering, is this Ghost of Base Patrick Henry Part 2 tonight? Yes, it is, ladies and gentlemen. Let me tell you, stand by to stand by. We're going to get to some sponsors, and then when I come back, I'm going to bring Ghost on the screen so I can get his initial reaction if he's not quite aware of it just yet. So you guys, let's bring up our first sponsor, and then we'll get on with the show. So first on deck, Goldco, alphalikesgold.com. Be prepared. It's easy. It's fast. The rich are buying gold. Big brother, you guys. So by now you've heard about this digital dollar idea that's being talked about and how it could let the government monitor and possibly control our purchases and financial activity, which is a little too big brother in my opinion. But unlike a digital dollar, precious metals, I'm talking about physical gold and silver, can't be manipulated with the click of a button. So if you like the sound of that, head over to alphalikesgold.com to get your free 2024 Gold IRA kit from my partners over at Goldco. It shows you how to diversify some of your hard-earned money with physical gold and silver, even if it's still in a retirement account. And as an American citizen, you can get up to $10,000 in free silver with qualified orders. At the very least, you want to be educated about your options, right? So head over to alphalikesgold.com to get your free, that's right, free 2024 Gold IRA kit. And I'm going to put on the Mike Lindell one for you next, and we'll be back in just a second.
You ask and we listen. We're finally bringing the most requested offer ever. Get the queen size premium My Pillow, now only $19.98. My Pillow is made with patented adjustable fill. It adjusts to your exact individual needs regardless of your sleep position. It helps keep your neck aligned and holds its shape all night long so you get the best sleep of your life. But that's not all. Get our 6-piece kitchen or bath towel sets only $25. Our brand new mattress topper as low as $69.98. Get our famous My Pillow bed sheets for as low as $25 and so much more. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to get huge discounts on all My Pillow products, including the premium queen size My Pillow, only $19.98. That's the lowest price ever. Don't delay, order today. From all of us here at My Pillow, thanks America!
Mike's funny, man. Solid American Patriot. Promo code is down in the description below. If you're new to the show, welcome. Do me a favor. If you're watching on Rumble, subscribe. It's free. Come on. And if you want to be a local supporter, of course, I appreciate that. Patreon as well. All those links are down in the description, including the links to follow my guest tonight, the man I'm going to bring up, Gordon, or better known as Ghost of Bass, Patrick Henry. Do you know what I'm about to bring up on the screen? Did you get the word yet?
I have no idea. Well, no, actually, I have no idea. But man, what's up, Alpha? How are you?
I'm good, bro. So this just came in 7 minutes ago in the group chat. All right. So let's bring this up and then we'll go from there.
Yeah. Okay. I did just see this right before we went live. Holy shit.
Oh,
damn.
If you guys aren't aware, this is the usdebtclot.org. A lot of cool things that are put on there from time to time. What you're seeing here on the screen, if you follow Badlands Media, if you're familiar with John, also known better as Patel Patriot, Devolution. And they just put this up on the US Debt Clock, bro. This is real time, you guys. This is not a screenshot. This is the, you guys can go look at it yourself, usdebtclot.org.
Debtclot.org. I want to check this out. Holy shit, it's real.
It is real, bro. This is, I'm not pulling the fast one. This is up live right now.
Dude, that's
holy
crazy.
Shit, Ghost.
Holy that's badass, smokes. Man. I love it.
If you guys are like, what are you talking about? Devolution's new to you. I would invite you to go check out Patel Patriot's Substack. Do you know the website for the Devolution by heart?
Devolution.link.
There you go. Devolution.link. It'll give you all the articles to what this is. Just so you guys know, this is a big freaking deal.
Right, that is a very big deal. Very big deal.
Out of all the things that I've seen them put up, some things I'm like, all right. This one makes me say, did they just ring the bell? Like, is that what's going on?
Yeah. And considering the timing, since John goes live with his show, with his weekly Devolution show at 10:30. So it's it's wild, man.
It is, man.
And we just got back from Deadwood.
And we just got back from freaking Deadwood. I'm pretty pumped up. I'll be monitoring the comments and everything as it goes up. Here's the deal. All right, we're gonna make this interactive tonight, you guys. 35 minutes from right now. Okay, 35 minutes from right now. Somebody in the chat say, Alpha, run the ad. And I got a 30-second ad to run. All right, because if I forget, then Alpha don't make no money. If Alpha don't make no money, then these shows will get shorter. So somebody remind me in 35 to 40 minutes. Ghosts.
It's 10:15, so I'll remind you at 10:50. I'll do that.
All right, brother. All right.
Yeah.
Dude, everybody's been saying, when are you bringing them back? When are you bringing them back? When are you bringing them back? You're here. You gonna want to just give us a little taste of what's going to be coming on tonight, and then we'll get into it.
Hell yeah, hell yeah. So tonight we're going to be talking about so last time we talked about like the whole Israel like the history of Judaism and kind of introduced the villain of the story, I would say. Like the villain of the story, right? So now we're going to go back and we're going to do the same thing from the other side, and we're going to talk about, in my opinion, what I see as the hero of the story, the protagonist of the story. The two that we're going to focus on tonight are, of course, Donald Trump and the House of Saud. And the House of Saud being on a huge century-long, about 120-year-long redemption arc from where it started in 1900 to now. And obviously there's been some pretty big twists and turns, and they've been working for bad guys and whatever. But now I think by the end of this, if y'all felt convinced of what I was trying to portray last time, I feel like I'm gonna do the same thing for you, but with the House of Saud and Donald Trump. The sword dance will make perfect sense to you, like with new context of the sword dance, new context to the relationship between Donald Trump and MBS, and I think a lot of hope and optimism, not based on bullshit, but based on like actual history and real facts. Of what's going to happen in the future.
And, I had communicated to you how important this is. I think one of the biggest things that I'm dealing with right now in the trenches of the information warfare is, no, Alpha, damn it, Trump's a Zionist. Trump's a Zionist. Listen, you guys, I'm not going to sit here and tell you he has not made statements that are very Zionist. What I'm trying to tell you is that there is a reason. And so, bro, I'm telling you, I told all those people, tune in tonight if you want to see what the heck I've been talking about. So where we started, brother, fire off.
Let's start actually with that right there, because I think just doing a current event like news cycle is going to help get people's beak wet and kind of get in the right mindset for this. So the big story, I just finished writing a very, very long take on the Badlands News Brief for tomorrow morning on this story. Donald Trump accused of committing massive crime with reported phone call. And this was actually reported, I think, yesterday, if I'm not mistaken. It might have been early this morning, but the new development here. So what was reported is that Trump called Netanyahu and told him, don't cut a deal, like don't cut a hostage deal or a peace deal or a ceasefire deal until I'm back in office, like, because it's going to make Kamala look good. So wait until I'm back in office to do it. As soon as I heard it, I was like, that's bullshit. But now they're saying it's a Logan Act violation, which is funny because CanCon has been saying this for a while. Like, why haven't they gone after him for the Logan Act? He's hosting all these world leaders at Mar-a-Lago. Why haven't they gone after him for the Logan Act? So you can check out like my full take on this in the morning on Badlands Substack on the news brief. I put videos in there, videos of interviews Trump's done, and I think gives a lot of background to the relationship between Netanyahu and Trump. We kind of went in deep into that in the last conversation about how Netanyahu and Trump, I do not think, are friends. My take on this situation is that this is coming from Netanyahu. If you think about, he's denying in the story, he's denying the phone call ever even happened, which is what you would expect him to say there. But basically, if you think about who benefits the most from this narrative deployment, Donald Trump is now the scapegoat, the reason that there isn't a peace, like this peace deal isn't going to happen, or the ceasefire deal isn't going to happen, which I've been saying this whole time. There isn't going to be a ceasefire deal. Netanyahu can't afford to do it. The guys who are backing him, the radicals in his government, are not going to allow him to do it. I don't think he wants to do it anyway, but even if he wanted to, they're not going to allow him to do it. But now Trump's the scapegoat. It hurts Trump, like optically. The optics here are not good for Trump. Like that's the intention. I don't really think it matters. But and then now they're talking about, there's multiple people now saying that they need to get that they're going to be filing paperwork to go after him for the Logan Act, which the Logan Act is like a private citizen interfering in geopolitical diplomacy. So yeah, it's and of course the thing that made me laugh the hardest was that Newsweek went to the Lincoln Project, for the for their take on the situation.
You know why I knew, and CanCon does always talk about the Logan Act, and
Yeah.
you know why I didn't want it, but the reason I always knew that it was a very real possibility is because we talk about all these things that they've been doing to Trump and January Sixers and parents. Why is it so important? Precedence.
Yeah, for sure.
And we know whether it be Obama, some of these other politicians that were going behind Trump and meeting with these people. So by them coming after Trump with the Logan Act, when he gets the back control, the throttle on the wheel, they just set precedence of when he actually gets to use the Logan Act for legitimate reasons of real violations of the Logan Act. So this one's going to be very real, I think, you guys.
Yeah. Well, and like I actually think something could come of this. I think it's a very positive development in my opinion, because I've been saying for a while now we're going to see. We already saw Trump turn on Netanyahu. That already happened back in 2021. It really didn't get publicized in the American media, but it got highly publicized in the Israeli media. Some pretty nasty things he said about Netanyahu. So
And I
what's
was
that?
saying, and you can bet your money that BB is going to cooperate with the DOJ to make sure Trump he is not going
Oh
to
yeah.
downplay. He is going to sell it on. Yeah, this is what he was trying to tell me to do. Oh yeah, he was doing it. Oh, like
Yeah. I mean, we'll get into it later once we get to that part of the story. But in my opinion, I think Netanyahu was behind the 2020 election steal. I think he was a big part of it. He was like a major player in that because there were reasons, like personal political reasons, he had for removing Trump because Trump was running an operation against, like a counterinsurgency operation against him. Um, but I've always said that Netanyahu at some point is going to publicly turn on Trump. He has to. He has no choice. He has to turn on Trump. And then I think what's going to happen is I think Trump is going to appeal to the Israeli people. And I think he's going to say, it's time for y'all to rise up against Netanyahu and throw his ass out of office. And I think they're going to go for it because he's way more popular in Israel, apparently, than Netanyahu is. So, and that right there, I think, is the reason why Trump has been so pro-Zion, like so pro-Israel this whole time, is because he's been trying the same way he's been trying to win over the American people. He's trying to win over as many Israeli people as he can, because ultimately the best way to diffuse a situation and not have World War III happen, which is the actual goal, is to make sure that these bums in Tel Aviv who are obviously pulling the strings on everything get overthrown by their own people. I think that's what needs to happen. I don't know that's what ends up happening. Maybe Israel does get destroyed. I mean, the path they're on right now is not promising for them. But there also are a lot of people in Israel who are secular, who don't care about like all this stuff that we're all like very invested in here, and just want to live their life. That's kind of what it seems like. So
don't be surprised, man.
We'll see.
To see a modern day Bible story of the people of Israel leaving the land of Israel.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, what's happening right now, there is such a deep connection, and we talked about it last time, but the deep connection between Ukraine and Israel, it's even deeper than like the stuff that we talked about last time. And everything that's happening right now in Ukraine, everything that's happening in Israel is the exact same thing. It's a mirror situation. And I do think that there's going to be some weird, crazy event where you're going to have that connection just come right out in the open. And it's going to be very, very obvious to everyone that it's like, oh, okay, these are actually not like these people are actually not like the ruling elite are actually Eastern European gangsters, mafiosos, organized crime syndicate from Eastern Europe. So, yeah, but so last time we left it at the part where like I got to that part where we were talking about the organized crime, how the organized crime came in. There's a big exodus out of Eastern Europe, like Soviet Russia in 1989. As Soviet Russia is collapsing, the Ukrainian mafia, the Jewish Ukrainian mafia starts leaving Russia, or the Soviet Russia, Ukraine, going to Israel, setting up shop there. and establishing a political presence. Eventually, they do merge with the Likud party, Netanyahu's party, and I'm fairly confident that they are in full control of the Israeli government. Now, that doesn't mean that the Israeli government was like clean or not corrupt before then, but I'm saying that I think it's like pouring jet fuel on the fire. I think like an even more like nefarious, like ruthless element came in and then like partnered up with the elements that were already there, and it just formed like a superstorm of just corruption, ruthlessness, and like and gangsterism. But let's back up. Like let's talk about the House of Saud, because that's really where we're going to go first.
You want me to bring this up
What's that?
on the screen?
Yes, please share my screen.
Boom, there it is.
Okay, so I'll get through like the first part of this history pretty quickly, because I have covered this stuff before. I can direct people if you want like a more thorough breakdown. John Harold and I did a right after October 7th on Badlands Rumble page. We did like a deep dive into the history of the Middle East, where basically I focused between like 1875 and 1947. I stopped intentionally right when like Israel was created, because I was kind of like, I don't think John really knows what he's getting himself into with this. And like, I'm going to say some stuff here that, is going to upset a lot of people in the audience. So we're going to stop right here. Let's let things play out, and then we'll pick this conversation back up and we'll revisit it. I also was still developing like my understanding of the latter half of the 20th century. So I didn't want to give like a half-baked presentation, but now I think I've fully wrapped my head around things, and I'm ready to talk about it. So we'll get through the first half of the 20th century pretty fast, because I can point you to that discussion if you want a deeper dive. But basically, when it comes to the Saudis, you have three states of Saud. There's three eras of like the House of Saud. The first is in the 18th century, the 1700s. That's what's known as the first state of Saud. And thought I had some maps here, but anyway, first state of Saud, which is basically just a small portion of the Arabian Peninsula, or like half the Arabian Peninsula. They get destroyed by the Ottoman Empire after they take Mecca in the early 1800s. And then they come back like 20 years later. They come back, they retake their land. That's the second state of Saud. So that's like in the 1800s, like throughout the 1800s. And so for another, 70 years, they are controlling the Arabian Peninsula. And it's important to remember that in 1744, you had what was called the Pact of Diriyah. So Diriyah is a suburb of Riyadh, and Riyadh is the capital of Saudi Arabia. Here's Saudi Arabia. Riyadh is about right here in the middle. And so Diriyah is like a little suburb of this central town. And Riyadh, up until about 1950, it's just kind of this tiny little backwater town in the middle of the desert with nothing really significant to it. But that's where the House of Saud comes from. That's their home, like their hometown. And so in 1744, you had this guy who was wandering around Arabia. He had been exiled by his family because he had these really radical ideas about Islam. His name was Al-Wahhab. And, he thought that Muslims had kind of like gotten away from what it meant to be Muslim. And he was like, we need to create like a new set of laws where we're going to revere the religion a lot more. And, women need to know their place and etc. That's Wahhabism. So his name was Al-Wahhab. Wahhabism. As I understand it, it wasn't as radical as it is now. I think the British kind of got their hands on it and made it and like cranked the volume up to volume 10. But it still was like a far more like radical Orthodox vision of Islam. And it was so radical that his own family disowned him and sent him off into the desert and said, like, we don't want anything to do with you anymore. And so that just kind of helps people, like, helps communicate the idea that like this thought that Islam is like this really, really radical, hardcore thing. That's a relatively new idea. I mean, 1744, that's not that long ago in the grand scheme of things. And so before then, you didn't have like these really, really hardcore ideas about coming out of Islam. I mean, granted, it's different from Christianity and it's not Western culture. It's not Western civilization. But it's not quite the thing that it's been presented to us here in the West by Fox News and the Republican Party. So Al-Wahhab teams up. He comes across this guy, Mohammed bin Saud, MBS, the original MBS. He's the patriarch of the House of Saud. And they basically form an alliance in 1744. It's called the Pact of Diriyah, where Al-Wahhab needed, political power. Because all he had, he was just like a theocrat. He was a, philosopher basically. And Al-Saud, MBS, needed kind of a rallying cry. He had the political power, but he needed kind of more of an ethos that he could get people to rally behind. And so they formed this pact. And the idea is that Wahhabism and the House of Saud will be one, and that forms the foundation of the House of Saud. And so those two things are intertwined from there moving forward. And that's what starts the first state of Saud, the second state of Saud. So fast forward to about 1890, you have these guys who their rival clan. So let me see if I can pull up a map of. I thought I had a map of Saudi Arabia sitting right here, but let me just grab one real quick. So you had this rival tribe called the Rashun, and let me grab this guy. And so, why is it not good? Well, let me just share my screen here. Here we go. So here's Riyadh right here. So you had a rival tribe that was located somewhere in this area. And so the Ottomans come to them and they say, hey, we'll give you a bunch of money if you go into Riyadh and you kill these guys. And this time, kill all of them. Make sure you kill every single one of them. We want this bloodline done. And so these guys take the money from the Ottomans and they go into, and the Ottomans are obviously operating up out of Turkey. And they're trying to maintain their influence down here along this coastline. And they feel threatened by this growing, reemerging power. And so the Al Rashid go in there and they kill them all. So one guy and his wife and maybe a few cousins and his kids escape, and they flee east and they meet up with this tribe called the Al-Murra. So the Al-Murra are known as the camel guys. They're the guys who raise the camels. So kind of like the Phoenicians in the ancient Middle East. The Phoenicians were the guys who had they made purple dye out of the snails. And so they had big purple sails on their boats. So whenever you saw a boat with purple sails, if you were in the middle of a battle, everyone stopped fighting and just let them sail through, because you did not want to mess with the Phoenicians, because they were the ones with the purple dye, and everybody wanted the purple dye because that dye meant you were royalty. So they were untouchable. Kind of same thing here. The Al-Murra are the guys who raise the best camels, and every single tribe is measured on the quality and the quantity of their camels. And so if you wanted the best camels, you better be friends with the Al-Murra, which means you never mess with them no matter what. And so these people who fled this slaughter, this massacre, reach the Al-Murra, and they know them, of course, because they've been trading with them. And the Al-Murra take them in and they head north and they follow the coastline and they take them to Kuwait. And the ruling family there had just recently, remember, this is 1890. So the ruling family there had just recently become acquainted with the British Empire. And the ruling family take in the House of Saud. There's a 15-year-old boy, a son, and they kind of they help educate the son. They raise him. They let the son hang out in the palace and attend court. They introduce him to all the diplomats and the people who are coming through, the British. And so the father who survived tells the son, he's like, we need to retake our homeland. About 10 years. They spend about 10 or 11 years in Kuwait. And so the son comes of age. He's about 25 at this point. 1900, 1901. And the father's like, it's time for us to retake. You need to go retake our homeland. And so this guy is known as this 25-year-old is known as Ibn Saud. He is the founder, Abdulaziz bin Abdul Rahman Al Saud. Ibn Saud is the name he's known by, but he's the founder of the modern state of Saudi Arabia, the third state of Saudi Arabia, which doesn't come into existence until 1932, 1934. That's like when the kingdoms are united, and we'll get to that. But it begins in about 1901, 1902. And so what he does is he goes around the eastern part of he goes around the eastern part of Arabia, and there's a lot of poverty in this area. There's no opportunity, there's no commerce, there's no economy, but there's a lot of young men who have nothing to do. And so the British are like, hey, we're going to help you. We're going to help you do this. Here's some gold. Go buy up the support of some tribes, because the easiest way to build an army in the Middle East is just to buy support. Because the culture of the Middle East is this. It's all about strength, like following strength and being a leader, but it's about providing. So if you're the guy who can provide opportunity for your tribe, then you become the leader. And the moment you stop providing opportunity, all the other guys in your tribe say, all right, we want a new leader now. And you get thrown out, and they bring in a new guy. So if you want to stay in power, and I'm talking about like as a Bedouin tribesman, like a nomad, or if you're like a fixed settlement, that's how you stay in power, is that you have to be able to provide for your people. And they take that pretty seriously, a lot more seriously than we do here in the West. In the West, like our whole system came up out of land gentry. So the king had all the land in the kingdom. He would carve up his kingdom and say, all right, you get this little portion, you get this little portion, you get this little portion. And then each of those guys would then carve up their portions to smaller guys, and everyone had to pay taxes to the guy above them. And if you don't pay taxes, you get your land and your title taken away, and it goes to somebody else. So it's like from a top down, like the pressure comes from the top down, the power comes from the top down. In the Middle East, it's actually a little inverted. It's like the power actually does come. It's oligarchy, because it's like the elders and the leaders of each little tribe. But the power is not. You don't have the divine right of kings that you had in Europe, where it's like, I have the authority from God to rule. You don't really have that necessarily. At least at the tribal level, maybe like when you're talking about the Persian Empire or something like that. But so this guy Ibn Saud, he goes around to all these young men, and he puts swords in their hands that the British had given them, swords and guns. And he says, hey, let's go take back what is ours. Like, let's go take back our kingdom. And he trains them. The British help him train them. And he gives them a name. He calls them, it's a long name. I don't remember exactly how to pronounce it all, but the short version of it is the Muslim Brotherhood. So these guys it's like the brethren of the something, something, something. And so the brethren, they become known as the Muslim Brotherhood. This is 1902. They have a very distinct, because everyone there wears these red keffiyehs. You probably seen in Palestine. In Palestine, they wear the black keffiyehs. It's like the black and white checkered thing. So the House of Saud has always worn a red one. So he creates like his own little unit of the Muslim Brotherhood, and they all wear these white keffiyehs. So it's a very like distinct look with this distinct band. And they go and they spend, you can see here in this map, from 1902 to 1906, they take back the Najd, which is this central region, Riyadh, and then Najd. And then they move from there they move east, and they go back and they take the whole eastern seaboard, Al-Hassa, which means, I think it means the water. So like the whole like culture and life and everything in this area revolves around water. Qatar is this little peninsula right here. So Qatar, it's like all their symbolism there is like mermaids and fish and like maritime stuff, because all of their wealth actually comes from pearls. There's like an enormous pearl bank on this coast right here. And so they actually were the guys who were like selling pearls to everyone around the world. And then eventually they got into oil eventually, but they actually, I think, are known more for natural gas than for oil now. But originally all their wealth came from pearls. So they're like a very much a maritime like trade, like a water trade, mariners, like that's their culture actually. Whereas the rest of Arabia is obviously desert, land based, camels, etc. So then after that,
real quick, Gordon.
yeah,
there's gonna be a moment where I got a surprise for the audience where we're gonna do a quick segue for a few minutes, and then we'll come back on.
Sure, sure, absolutely, yeah. Whenever you want. So then after that, he moves north to Shamar, where all the mountains are. He takes over Shamar, and then moves west, goes to Hijaz. So Hijaz is the most important of all of these areas. This is the Hijaz kingdom. So some of you have probably seen the movie Lawrence of Arabia. Lawrence of Arabia was actually a pretty historically accurate movie. I mean, all the people in the movie are actually real people, real characters, with the exception of this guy. This guy was a fictional character. He was kind of an amalgamation of different, smaller characters. But basically, for those who haven't seen the movie is about really two men. It's about T.E. Lawrence, this guy, and this guy, Prince Faisal. And so Prince Faisal is the son of this guy, Hussein bin Ali al-Hashimi. So these are the Hashemites. So the Hashemites descend directly from the Prophet Muhammad. They are his direct bloodline. The name Hashemite, Hashimi, comes from the grandfather of the Prophet Muhammad, whose name he had a real name, but they changed his name. They gave him like a nickname, Hashim, which means he who feeds the starving and he who pulverizes evil, because 50 years before the Prophet Muhammad was born, he was he was a strong man. He was a great leader, came into Mecca. There were a bunch of bandits there who had taken over and had desecrated like all the holy sites there. And, that black cube that you always see like in Mecca that people worship. Like there's all of these conspiracy theories about what that is and like why they worship it and stuff. And so I dug into what is it? Like I wanted to know what it was. Actually what it is it is considered the first altar. So when Abraham left Babylon and traveled down out of Babylon, he built an altar at the site where he believed Adam and Eve had built the first altar when they left the Garden of Eden. So the belief is, and I'm not saying this is true, but the belief is that black cube is actually just cloth. It's like cloth draped over this tiny little simple altar, like a one-person prayer room, And basically the belief is that Abraham is the original one who built that. And it was built on the foundation where Adam and Eve built the very, very first altar when they left the Garden of Eden. So that's what they're praying to. It's considered like the first church to the God of Abraham, like the same God that is recognized by Christians and Jews. And that's why it's considered such an holy site. So just for people to understand, because I know people like on 4chan and stuff, they say it's the black cube of Saturn and all that kind of stuff. But the real story there is it's believed to be the altar built by Abraham on the foundation of the altar built by Adam and Eve, which I thought was fascinating. But anyway, so Hashim comes into this place. This is in the year 550, something like that. And these bandits have taken over Mecca. They've desecrated this altar. And they're basically killing everybody and enslaving people. So he drives the bandits out, and then he starts this process or this tradition of he sends the word out. He tells all the people who've scattered into the desert, come back to Mecca. I'll feed you. I'll take care of you. I'll protect you from these guys. And so he started this tradition of what's called desert hospitality, where when you come out of the desert, you take care of the people coming out of the desert because you would want them to take care of you. You give them food, you give them shelter, you give them water, you take care of them. And so he
pause that thought, Gordon.
Yep.
We're going to go. All right, you guys, I know we're here for one show, but we had something very interesting. So we're going to segue real quick. So I'm going to pull this off the screen real quick, Gordon. And I'm going to bring up, I reached out to John. Let me hit the volume.
His gut health stuff is really cool and effective.
All right. They're still joking around, but here in less than a minute, they're going to get into the devolution on the U.S. debt clock. So we're going to tap in. They're live. We're live. John knows that I have him and the guys on the screen over here. So as soon as they're done with this ad, you probably timed that perfect just to get some extra audience on the ad. That was pretty freaking slick of
Hell
John.
Yeah. I'm gonna grab some water.
Yeah, go refill. So for you guys that joined a little late, saying what the heck, why are you guys bringing on the Power Hour here on the AlphaWarrior Show? That's because USDebtClock.org showed devolution, and kind of a big deal. And John and them are going to talk about it right now for a few minutes. So we will tap in on them while they talk about it, and then once they're done, we will jump right back onto our scheduled programming. And real quick, while we're waiting on John and them, let everybody know why understanding the history, why we're going all the way back to 500 is so important to what we're going to bring when we get to Trump today.
Very, very important question, because there was a betrayal that I'm about to explain after World War II, a betrayal of the House of Saud and the Hashemites, where the Hashemites were basically overthrown by the House of Saud. And with backing of the British. And that, I think, is the redemption arc. I think the real redemption arc is the House of Saud basically making that situation right, righting that wrong.
All right, here we go. Let's bring it up.
Yeah, on the screen here. I got a few messages over this, which is funny. Bernie Brett, you probably said it best. How'd you say it? Like, everybody's going to be talking about devolution now.
Well, whenever stuff like this happens, I always, like I do with the media, I try to start with, what do I think the intention is here, right? Obvious. Like, is this somebody who's really interested in devolution? I mean, it's a well-known website. People are talking about it online, and the bitter conspiracy theorist in me believes that this may be certain influencers gearing up to start talking about the thing that they haven't been talking about for years and pretending that they just discovered it. That's kind of a cynical take on it. So I expect Tim Pool to be discussing devolution with Alpha and CanCon in a few weeks. But yeah, I mean,
did you say with Alpha and CanCon?
Alpha and CanCon, he's going to bring the two guys on who haven't read the Devolution series from Badlands.
Well, it's funny you say that, because Alpha texted me before the show and he's like, "Hey man, can you come on and talk about this this debt clock thing?" And I was like, "Hey, I'm just going live." And he's like, "Okay, well, let me know when you are live and I'll like go live to your show." So
2 years of working with the guy who wrote the Devolution series didn't get him, but the U.S. debt clock putting the graphic on, he's starting to.
No, he's sent me on a few times. No, so he's interviewing me, but
CanCon's really the one we should give shit to.
Okay, this is where I'm going to rain on your parade. This website, like, this is cool. I'm all for anybody bringing attention to devolution in general, like, obviously, and probably more than anybody out there, I would love confirmation in any form it comes, but I want it to be actual confirmation. Okay. I'm not going to let my confirmation bias get in the way of that, or at least try not to. This website, usdebtclock.org, if you go to the bottom here and click this about, it takes you to their about page. And right down here at the bottom, I'll zoom in so everybody can see, usdebtclock.org is not associated with any government agency or funded by or affiliated with any politically active party, organization, or lobbying group. Not affiliated with any of the other physical national debt clocks in NYC or any other debt clock online. This is a business. Like, it's a group of people who started a business. They calculate our debt and they have it on a website. This would be no different than like badlandsmedia.tv on our website putting a devolution overlay on the main screen, or like any website out there. Okay. So, I mean, like I said, maybe they're fans. Maybe they've read the series. I don't know. Maybe they're talking about devolution in a different context. Who knows? But this, to me, is kind of a nothing burger. There was a time, I don't remember what it was, but it was back in it was a while ago. But the debt clock had something else on here. I think it was a Bible passage or something, or a countdown, maybe. And
I don't remember.
I remember posting the same thing. Let me pull this up. This was back in October 1st of 2023. I posted before the clickbait gets too out of control about the US Debt Clock website from their app. US Debt Clock is not associated. Same thing. So whatever, I can't remember what it was that was posted back then. Same thought process. Interesting, cool, bringing attention to it. Love it. Great. Not what everybody thinks it is. Sorry.
Yeah, my first question to you before the show started when you mentioned this was, is there any context to this? Like, did they tweet something out about why they might have done this or anything? And there's not. And I just looked at the Twitter account to see if there was anything at all that gave an explanation for it. So it's just kind of a neat thing that a popular website has devolution on the screen, but that's about it. So kind of neat. There's going to be a lot of grifting off of it. So watch for people to do that.
Love that. Dave says I'm a wet blanket as usual.
Yeah.
Alpha texted me. We watching. It was JFK.
What'd you say?
We watching. It was JFK,
doesn't
and I
get
said back, "It was JFK?" And he said, "That what Gordon said." He texts like you would. Imagine he texts.
What a mess.
They're watching us read texts from them now.
Yep.
So
the most likely explanation is that they're using devolution in the context of the way the band Devo did, which is a devolving of humankind. So they're probably talking about a devolving of the dollar or a devolving of the U.S.
or
financial system or
G-Money's definition
whatever.
of it is the legal transfer of property from one owner to another, which is there's many separate definitions of devolution, guys.
Yeah, so
it
there's
is weird that it's like
Yeah.
branded. Like, yeah, it seems very branded and intentional, but
Sure does. But yeah, so sorry about that, everybody. But
so that is not a devolution notable, I would say. However, there are other devolution notables going on out there this week.
yes,
Ghost in the chat said Alpha meant it was a JFK overlay on the Debt Clock website. I don't know if that's the previous one
Thank you, Gordon.
that you had been referring to, perhaps.
oh maybe. I don't know. The coins are interesting too. Dang, I can't scroll on this thing. I'm using a different browser tonight, hoping that it doesn't
one coin that
mess with my stream.
over
So far, so good.
Yeah. If I'm looking, if I'm trying to overanalyze, which is what we often do, and try to say, are they trying to suggest anything with this? Again, not saying patriots, but like the people running this website. It does make me think of when you mentioned G-Money, transfer of ownership, and Chris Paul often uses the term drainage. You know, the stuff we've discussed with U.S. Treasury and what's really going on with seizures of Silicon Valley Bank, First Republic Bank, Swiss, Credit Suisse overseas, and then also Coinbase. Many of us have discussed sort of in Bitcoin terms, the Coinbase is being used to custody Bitcoin for the ETFs. They were the ones the US government sort of deemed trustworthy, quote unquote, to custody that Bitcoin. So while a lot of people who want decentralization are concerned by that, others who believe in things like devolution believe that Coinbase is sort of draining that Bitcoin from BlackRock and Vanguard, et cetera, because it would be pretty convenient if we did have a seizure of assets under a certain executive order, if all that regime Bitcoin was conveniently located in a very well-known exchange.
Yeah,
I love the dump truck coins. Those are my favorite.
There's a queue
in the corn.
there.
They've got no Bitcoin on here. Seems like a missed
They're
opportunity.
just getting the fact that they're looking at a big old
This might be my house.
XRP right in the middle of that
That's
damn.
my house, guys. Never mind.
Is there XRP in the middle?
There's a Q, and then
big
there's
old X right there.
I thought maybe that was Dimitri Symes' house. It's over there in Virginia.
You got the oil
Yeah,
or
no idea what that
Texas.
is. But yeah, so well,
There's the
Interesting.
I'm
cue.
just
We shall see
saying,
what the
Tim
next-
Pool, take it to the bank. Tim
That's
Pool will start
RoboCop.
talking about
Is that
evolution.
RoboCop? Is the blue one? Is that RoboCop?
No.
Wait, that's
It
Colorado.
looks like it at
Is
a
that
glance.
Colorado where the
What?
Which blue
It's hard
one?
to make out.
where that one cue is, or is that more Nevada?
I can't tell what it is, but it reminds me. It looks like
Uh,
RoboCop, like his helmet.
Damn it.
And I'm sure it's not, but
I don't see that. I don't know what I do see, but it's not that.
Ash said the U.S. debt clock website's been around forever to shed light on debt. Is there a reason to believe they aren't patriots?
Well, I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
well,
it's
I mean,
always
they're
possible.
sure they're patriots. I just,
she probably meant like part of the Patriot plan.
yeah, I don't see any reason to think.
All right, so they're done with it. Let me go ahead and mute that because they're still in my ear. John, freaking wet blanket, man, right on everybody's parade, or maybe that's what he's supposed to do. I don't know, John. Shout out to BB and Red Pill 78 and Zach that jumped in our chat for a little bit. All right, like I said, I wanted to segue there real quick since we had that happen in real time. Let's bring it back to this, get the audience back on track here. I want to recap just where we left off to get everybody's mind back on it, and then
yes. So basically, I was just talking about. I was explaining the history of Hashim and how he started this tradition of taking care of people and like mercy, and a lot of the things that actually were the teachings of Jesus, because Muhammad actually was his somehow he ended up an orphan. It's like everybody dies. But because he comes from such a revered bloodline, Muhammad ends up getting raised by the tribe, which is like a very rare thing apparently in that culture. But the tribe is a Christian tribe, so he's raised Christian, which is why Islam is fundamentally believes that Jesus is the Messiah, which is something we learned or people learned after the recent Paris opening of the Olympics, because Iran put up billboards. I don't know if you saw that, Alpha, but Iran put up billboards saying of the Last Supper, basically as like a middle finger to France and saying, yes, Jesus is the Messiah, like son of the Virgin Mary. Indeed, he's the Messiah, something like that. But yeah, so in Oak, Colonel McCullough at Deadwood came up to me and said that he's like, that when he realized that, like when I posted about that and I explained it, because this is something that I've known for a while. This is like a revelation that I had like 2 years ago, year and a half ago. And then actually about a year ago, I was posting about it on X when I recreated a new X account, and actually had like Muslim scholars reach out to me, and because I wasn't fully like confident in it. Is like I was like, this is what I've been reading. I've been like, I didn't read the Quran or anything, but I was reading just about it, and I was reading like into it and all that. And I was like, I don't know if I have this right or not. And these Muslim scholars reached out to me and were like, yes, you have this right. This is exactly what we believe. And then a bunch of Muslims have also since then confirmed that as well. And it's kind of like a mind-blowing epiphany to like realize that, because I grew up, I was 13 when 9/11 happened. And I was raised to believe that Muslims hated me because of Jesus. So it's like, wow, we were like really completely lied to. And so Oak was saying the same thing. Oak was like, the military told him, this is a colonel in the military, and he thought the same thing because the military told him that, and so it's just like, it's mind blowing that like the levels of deception that have been engaged against us. And so, and like people always want to come and kind of like argue the semantics about like, well, they actually believe this about it. I'm like, dude, I don't care. I don't care what the semantics are. I was lied to. I was told that they hate Jesus and they wanted to kill me because I believe in Jesus. And turns out that's not true at all. And I think tonight, like, we're going to kind of like add some meat into that like epiphany and be like, this is why in my opinion, the alliance between Donald Trump and Saudi Arabia is so important, because I think what it represents an alliance between Christianity and Islam in a very positive way, where we're not going to merge into one religion or anything like that. Ash has accused me of saying that before. I've never once proposed that. But if you are going to go to war, this is what I said at GART last year, the first time I ever went. If we're going to go to war with the devil, if we're going to go to war with Satan, I can't think of a better, like, knowing what I know now about Islam, I can't think of a better ally than Islam. Like real Islam, not the bullshit CIA version of Islam, the British Empire version of Islam. but like real Islam.
The actual original historic Islam.
Yeah. And so like the Prophet Muhammad, for example, here's another thing that like debunked. The Prophet Muhammad, his first wife, he was married to for 25 years. He married her when he was 25. She was like an older widow. She was very wealthy. He was dirt poor. He was an orphan. She wore the pants in the relationship, and she actually like told him what to do because she was the one with all the money. And he was monogamous with her for 25 years until she died when he was 50. And it wasn't until she died that he started marrying for political advantage to like, form political alliances. By that time, he had his like epiphany and all that, or his vision or whatever, and it started Islam. And so then he started marrying for, political advantage. And I think he married like 10 times in 11 years. And then he dies when he's in his early 60s. But anyway, like that was just a major epiphany for me. It's like, oh, wow. Okay. So his wife, this woman is like his first wife, is very, very important in Islam. And she embraces the teachings of his grandfather of like being merciful, taking care of people, charity, all the stuff that we like in the Christian doctrine, like embrace. And so that becomes a very important tradition moving forward, like desert hospitality. It becomes like a cornerstone of Islam, basically. And so the Hashemites become this very, very important bloodline. And obviously there's like wars within Islam. There's, Sunni and Shia, which is all about, whether the leaders like within Islamic communities should be directly of the blood of Muhammad. And what's funny is that the blood of Muhammad, the Hashemites become Sunni, which is that's the sect of Islam, which doesn't think you have to have like this royal bloodline. They just think whoever's the most capable leader should be the leader. That's what Sunni Islam believes. Shia, which is like Iran, that's like 10% of all Muslims worldwide. They're the ones who believe that it has to be a direct blood descendant of the Prophet Muhammad. That those are the only people who are capable of being leaders. Kind of similar to like the European idea of like royal bloodlines, right? So interesting dynamic. Not really that relevant to this discussion, but just kind of a little sidebar. So the Hashemites, there's like over the hundreds of years, the 500 years after Muhammad dies, there's all these different conflicts and wars and caliphates that come and go. We don't need to talk about any of that. But around the year 1200, the Hashemites retake control of Mecca. And from 1200 until 1919, the end of World War I, they are the rulers of Mecca. And they're considered a very, very they're considered like good people. Like they, like, just like the Muhammad's grandfather, they have all those values. They take care of people. So they're considered, a good, noble family, right? And that's this family right here, the family that you see in the film Lawrence of Arabia. And so this guy, Hussein, is like, we should rebel against the Ottoman Empire, and we should, find a partner, like maybe Britain or one of these other powerful nations. We should partner up with them. Britain is going to war, it looks like, with the Ottomans. This is kind of like leading up to World War I. And so these correspondents begin, and they're like, we should, work with these guys to liberate ourselves from the Ottoman Empire. So in the movie Lawrence of Arabia, it's explained how the British offer to these guys, hey, if you rally all the Arabs against the Ottomans and help us defeat them, at the end of this war, we will give you autonomy. We will give you your country, and you can have your independence, and you can have your country. And these guys are all kind of like, we don't really believe you, but what choice do we have? Like, okay, deal. And so this guy is the leader. He's not the firstborn son. I think he's the thirdborn son, but he's the most capable. And so he kind of becomes the leader of the whole movement with Lawrence of Arabia. In the movie, they age him up in the movie. They make him seem a little older than he really was. But he's the leader of the whole movement. And then, of course, you have the Balfour Declaration. You probably heard of that in 1917. The Balfour Declaration is the promise from the British government to the Rothschilds family that they are going to create the state of Israel eventually at some point from the nation of Palestine. And then more importantly, so this is the Balfour Declaration. It was a promise made by Arthur James Balfour, the Earl of Balfour, to Walter Rothschild in 1917, a signed written note, right? And so, more importantly, you have what's called the Pico-Sykes Agreement in 1919. And so, during World War I, as the war is winding down, this French industrialist named Francois Jorge Pico and Sir Mark Sykes, they both basically are like, hey, we need to carve up this land. In 1906, they found this enormous oil belt in Iran, which they figured out eventually went into Iraq. And they said, we got to make sure this oil is ours, Europe's. And so even though Britain was the one who was running the show during World War I and working with the Arabs on this, they wanted to keep Russia out of the Middle East. And so this is all connecting down to like modern politics. It's the same story over and over and over again. They wanted to keep Russia out of the Middle East. So in order to do that, they brought the French in and they said, all right, look, you get part of it and we get part of it. So Britain are going to take Palestine, and we're going to take Iraq, and we're going to take Transjordan, the area between Palestine and Iraq, and we're going to give you Lebanon, and we're going to give you Syria, and you're going to basically, and the way it's going to work is this is, and so Mark Sykes is also the guy who developed the flag of the Arab Revolt, and so this is the flag of the Arab Revolt. So he actually designed this flag for the Hashemites to carry into battle in World War I, and this is the meaning of it. These are the three main caliphates that were around after the Prophet Muhammad, and then the red triangle stands for the Hashemites. And so that's literally where that flag comes from. It was a British oligarch who designed it for them. He probably had knowledge of like colors that were important to them and whatnot, but that flag then influences all of these different flags. I mean, these are just some of the flags, but like all these nations today have this flag, including Palestine. And it's all because of that flag. So just crazy how this stuff all plays out. But this is a really important map right here. So Alpha, you were in Iraq, right?
Yes, I was.
You and Can't, yeah. So this map is probably going to mean something to you. Here are all the oil fields in Iraq, right? And Kirkuk, I'm sure you're familiar with that.
Definitely familiar with that city.
Yeah, so that's the biggest. That's like the big daddy oil field right there. And so what they determine, and then there's a bunch down here. And so this is what started Desert Storm. Was
right. That was right there by Basra and all that. Uh-huh.
Yeah. So like they were doing like they accused Kuwait of doing like the whatever diagonal drilling to get to these other like these large oil fields, and that's what started Desert Storm in 1991. But I digress. So this is really what it was all about. So Britain says, look, we're going to pump the oil. All right. And these black lines are oil pipelines. And they're like, and then you can see the white lines here, the modern day countries. So here's Syria, here's Iraq, here's Jordan, and here's Palestine. And they're like, all right, so we're going to pump oil to Haifa in Palestine, modern day Israel. But really we're going to pipe most of it to Lebanon. And it's going to be France's job to protect the pipelines. We're going to pump it. France is going to protect it. And then we're going to send it to the ships and we'll ship it out. And so if you look at the way that like they actually shape Jordan I think is the only country in the Middle East that doesn't have its own domestic oil industry, even though they have massive oil deposits underneath their feet. It's kind of crazy. Like they actually laid out the borders of Jordan just to protect this pipeline. This pipeline is no longer in use, by the way, because once Israel was created in 1947, the Arabs were like, all right, F you. And they just cut the pipelines. And so these pipelines don't even run anymore. But anyway, so in 1925, they convince Ibn Saud, getting back to the main story, to go over to the Hashemites and conquer. This is the British. So the British are now at this point, they're funding Ibn Saud from 1902 to 1920, like to 19, forever, basically. They're funding Ibn Saud, but they're also funding the Hashemites. And it's kind of like they're funding multiple different horses to see which horse wins. And they're like, whichever horse, proves to be the strongest, that'll be our guy. And there was a lot of debate within the British oligarchs about who they should go with. Should they go with the Hashemites or should they go with the Saudis? And they decided ultimately to go with the Saudis. I think they liked personally, the reason I think they went with the Saudis is because they liked the Muslim Brotherhood model that they had developed, and they were like, we can use this Muslim Brotherhood model, and we'll get to that in a minute. But
Real
what
quick,
they do,
just notice Maze dropped a comment, and this looks like it was about 6 minutes ago. I don't know if this was, an addition or supplement, but she put, Chrislam was endorsed and formalized at the 7th Congress of the Leaders of the World and Traditional Religions held on September 14th to the 15th in 22 in Nur-Sultan, Kazakhstan. Don't know.
Read that one more time.
Chrislam was endorsed and
Chrislam.
formalized at the 7th Congress of Leaders of the World and Traditional Religions held on September 14th to the 15th, 2022 in Nur-Sultan, Kazakhstan.
That's weird. Well, Kazakhstan is a weird place. They embrace some form of mysticism. Like if you go look at like their capital, it's like all Illuminati, like architecture and stuff. And they believe in like this weird phoenix religion where like there's this phoenix bird everywhere, like in their giant skyscrapers. And it's a weird place. Like that place gives me the creeps. Astana, I think, is their capital. Very, very weird place. They're definitely into like sorcery and magic, and whatever they're talking about, like they don't speak for like that is weird. Chrislam, that sounds like Antichrist sort of like kind of behavior for sure.
They have a huge pentagram that you can see from the sky on one of the islands there.
Yeah. It's a weird place. Tons and tons and tons of wealth. That in Turkmenistan, which is a place nobody ever talks about. Turkmenistan is like their cities are so ridiculous, but they're all completely empty. There's like nobody there, but they have these massive, like really, really nice looking cities, but nobody lives there because it's only, the ultra wealthy, and there's only a handful of them. I don't know. It's a weird place. But anyway, so very important how this is all set up. All of this is set up like the game board that's being set up right here between 1917 and 1934. That basically comes to define the entire 20th century and sets the game board for where we are right now. And in my opinion, I think it was set up this way for World War III. They put this ball in motion, knowing that this is how they were going to start World War III, with the Balfour Declaration with Israel. So,
and Beirut, right there, that's where we had that huge freaking explosion right there.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
What was that, like 2021?
August 2020. It was the agricultural chemical that was in that warehouse. It was what was the chemical? Was it nitrite? Nitrate, I think it was.
No, I want to say it was ammonium
nitrate. I think it was ammonium nitrate, which is used in like fertilizer or something like that. There's a warehouse of it, and it either got blown up or it was an accident. But it was the largest non-nuclear explosion in history. If you pull up a picture of it, it's like ridiculous. And that's actually relevant again because in Haifa, right here, Haifa is the only deep water port in Israel. They have like massive warehouses or whatever, or storage facilities full of that stuff next to an operating oil refinery. And basically Hezbollah like sent a drone in there and filmed the whole thing. And we're like, yo, if we wanted to kill all of you, we would just blow this up like tomorrow. So just know that we have the means to blow this place up, which would basically level this entire city, and it would leave you without a deep water port. We're not going to do that. Don't invade Lebanon. That was like them basically being like, fuck around, find out. Don't like stay out of Lebanon. But anyway, interesting little development there.
So Maze added to that comment. She said that all the religious leaders attended it, including the Pope.
That doesn't surprise me at all. But I can guarantee you that Mohammed bin Salman, who's considered the custodian of the two holy mosques, he's like that's considered the leader of the sovereign of Saudi Arabia is considered kind of like the leader of Islam, the custodian of the two holy mosques. That's like the closest thing they have to the popes. I guarantee you he didn't go to that. Because what he's been doing is he's actually been attending mass in Egypt since like 2017. And then he started hosting mass in Saudi Arabia in 2019. But we'll get to that later. So he's actually trying to bring Christianity to Saudi Arabia, not to merge it with Islam, but so they can coexist side by side, which is a much healthier model, I think, than trying to form one religion. But anyway, so 1925, the British convince Ibn Saud to ride west and conquer the kingdom of Hijaz. And here's the kingdom of Hijaz. I just saw, I had a map of it. It was right here. So the green is the actual kingdom back in World War I, like the actual kingdom of Hijaz. The red is the current political boundary in Saudi Arabia. Like they have like political boundaries of, like states, almost the same way we have states, they have like regions. And so the region of Hijaz, or Hijaz, however you pronounce it, that's the region in Saudi Arabia. Now the green represents the 700-year kingdom that ended basically in 1923, 1925. So Ibn Saud goes there. He defeats them in battle. He doesn't kill them. He doesn't kill the Hashemites because he said, he's like, y'all are very important. You're the blood of Muhammad. He's like, but, this kingdom belongs to me now. And so he maintains the two kingdoms. He maintains the kingdom of Hijaz and the kingdom of Saud, the third state of Saud, for about 8 years, something like that, like early 1930s. He then unites the two kingdoms in the early 1930s, the Eastern Kingdom and the Western Kingdom, and that's when Saudi Arabia officially becomes Saudi Arabia. And that was with the help of the British. So before that, in 1927, basically he had conquered the entire Arabian Peninsula. He's achieved this map right here that I started with. This one right here. So he's achieved all this. It's about 1927. Assyria is not quite conquered yet. That happens a few years later, but he's conquered basically most of the Arabian Peninsula. And the British then infiltrate. He figures out that the British have infiltrated the Muslim Brotherhood. And the reason they did that is because they wanted to build a railroad between Haifa and Basra. So you have Basra right here in Iraq, right? Mm-hmm. And you have this railroad that runs up to Baghdad, but you don't have a railroad that runs across Arabia to Haifa. So they wanted to connect Haifa to Basra, but they needed to go through Transjordan. They needed to go through Iraq. They needed to go through Saudi Arabia to get there. And by this time, Ibn Saud knew about the Balfour Declaration, and he said, there's no way in hell I'm letting y'all do that. Absolutely not, because I know that this is one day going to end up not belonging to the Arabs. And so, no, you're not building this railroad. And so they're like, all right, well, this guy's got to go now. So they infiltrate the Muslim Brotherhood. They pay off some of the lieutenants. Ibn Saud, very smart guy, figures it out. So he sends a spy into his ranks to like spy on them. The guy figures everything out. He writes everything down. He reports it back to him, and he says, and so basically Ibn Saud's like, all right, well, I have to destroy the Muslim Brotherhood now because they've all turned on me. So then he forms another like army outside of the Muslim Brotherhood. He goes to war with them in 1928. There's 3 major battles over the course of like a year or two. And then because what was happening was he said, all right, we're having peace now. We're not going to do any more raids. We're not going to attack any of our our brothers anymore. And the Muslim Brotherhood continues raiding people in Iraq and Jordan. And even though he said, stop doing that. And it's because the British were telling him, hey man, go stir up trouble, proxy wars. Right. And so he's like, I have to destroy the Muslim Brotherhood. He destroys the Muslim Brotherhood. At the exact same time this is happening, you have the British operating down here in Cairo, Egypt. And, 30 years before, they had set up these madrasas in the 1880s, 1890s. They set up these schools, these Muslim schools, where they were like, hey, we should teach this Wahhabi stuff. We should start teaching this to the Egyptians down here and exporting this stuff. And so they start teaching radical Islam to people in Egypt. And then 30 years later, all those students come of age and they're all radicalized, 30-something-year-old men. And they're like, hey, y'all should form a group. why don't we call it the Muslim Brotherhood? Isn't that a great idea? And so that's the Muslim Brotherhood that we know now. It actually started in Cairo, Egypt in 1928, the exact same year that Ibn Saud destroys the original Muslim Brotherhood, his own creation, because it was becoming unruly, because the British had corrupted it and tried to turn it against him.
God,
And
this is so familiar, different names and a different area of the world, but so similar to what we know as what the CIA and it's just crazy, bro.
It's like the same story over and over and over again, right? And so that's where we're getting to, like with the redemption, like you can see the redemption arc forming here, because what happens from there is that Ibn Saud dies in about, I think he dies in 1953. I have his, I think I have his, no, I thought I had his death date here. But anyway, so he dies in 1953, 1954. He appoints, before he dies, he appoints one of his sons. You know, he has 100 children, I think. I think he has like 60 sons.
Jesus.
Yeah, if you can imagine. He had a lot of wives. But I think he has 100 children, 60 sons. And basically, okay, and then here are the maps I was looking for earlier. You have here's the first state of Saud. This is in the 1700s. The second state of Saud in the 1800s. And so his children basically take turns, you know, being like ruling, right? And you have the first, there actually really aren't that many kings in the history of Saudi Arabia. There really have not been that many. But the first one is this guy, King Saud, and he's kind of an idiot. He's kind of like a knucklehead, but because he's the firstborn, everyone's like, all right, you're the guy. And so he rules from 1953 to 1964. And by the early 60s, basically all of his brothers are sick of his crap because he's just not competent. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's in over his head. Things are not going well, like economically for them. And they basically depose him. So rather than like kill him, which is what you might expect, like you might expect them to, like that's what they would do in Europe, is they just kill him. But instead, because they're not nearly as ruthless as like our culture has presented them as being, not nearly as ruthless as the European nobility, they just depose him. They just all get together and say, dude, you're not king anymore. Faisal's king now. So this guy, Faisal, this guy looks like he's out of central casting. Like he looks like a Hollywood villain. But he's actually like a really, really earnest, good nationalist who actually wanted to help his people, I learned. And so he actually met with JFK in 1961, right after JFK became president.
Damn, this is interesting, bro.
in a very secret meeting. We only know about this meeting from the JFK files that Trump released. Like that's the only reason we know about it. So it was a secret meeting. At the time, he's, I believe, either crown prince or maybe a deputy crown prince. But basically, JFK brings him in. And he says, "Look, dude, if y'all want to make Saudi Arabia a great country, you need to take all of this wealth that you have acquired from this oil, and you need to invest it back in your people. And you need to start like taking care of them. You need to go back to the tenets of like the Hashemites, and you need to like provide for them." And it's crazy to think of JFK like proposing socialism, because he was like, you should give them health care, you should get rid of slavery, because in the 60s they still had slavery in Saudi Arabia. And he's like, you should get rid of the slavery, you should, have a form of socialism because it's very unique circumstances. And if you can build a great people, like a great population, that will then make your family like a great ruling family, and they will love you and your people will love you for it. And I think that actually really it seemed to really resonate with Faisal, and it stuck with him. And so when he becomes king in 1964, remember JFK was killed then 2 years later, in 1963, he becomes king in 1964, and he implements this 10-point plan, which is basically verbatim exactly what JFK told him he should do. He does it. So he outlaws slavery. He announces like a healthcare plan for all Saudi citizens that paid for by the royal family. By the way, they don't pay any taxes in Saudi Arabia. I don't know if you know that, but they don't pay any taxes in Saudi Arabia. The royal family pays for everything. Now, I mean, everything belongs to the royal family, but I mean, think about it. No taxes. Like I just always think about that, dude. No taxes. Kind of badass.
It is. Pause there. I'm going to break to that commercial that I told everybody we were going to do.
Do your commercial.
And this will give you a chance. So just so you know, we got 45 seconds. So if you want to go refill your water and stuff, you got 45. Here you guys go. We'll be back in just a moment.
Science proves that a healthy immune system is the body's first defense against the smallest of ailments to the most catastrophic. Coriolus versicolor is the most sought-after, all-natural supplement for both humans and pets to help boost the immune system. There are over 400 studies worldwide on its effectiveness in humans, including Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, MD Anderson Cancer Center, and now from the University of Pennsylvania School of Veterinary Medicine. Together, we can help reverse this terrible tide now plaguing your loved ones and give them the immune-boosting supplements that they need.
Perfect timing.
Nice.
Jumping in the seat, grabbing the headset, ready to rock and roll. All right, we're back, brother. Just a reminder, you guys, if you joined late, do me a solid, smash that like button. Make sure you subscribe. The content is free. And all the links to not only find Gordon, his Substack, but all the affiliates and sponsors that we have that support this show are down below. You guys know nobody owns the AlphaWarrior Show. This show is completely runs off of your guys' support and that of our partners and affiliates. So go and help those people out. And back to you, Gordon. Fire off, baby.
Hell yeah. Okay, so we're at 1964 now. Faisal has become king. You can see, as it says right here, he outlawed slavery, spread public education, introduced television, and then it caused a crisis in the United States with the 1973 oil embargo. So let's talk about that. So 1967, 3 years after he becomes king, we get this event, which I think we touched on last time, and that was the USS Liberty. Remember? So USS Liberty, you have the 6-day war. This is when Israel invades Palestine and Egypt, and basically they attack the USS Liberty. They try to draw the United States into a war with them. They try to blame it on Egypt so that the United States would attack Egypt and then start trigger a massive war. It didn't work, but ever since that invasion, it's a 6-day conflict. That's when the IDF occupies Palestine, and they've occupied Palestine ever since. So that's the entire conflict that we're talking about right now in Palestine started in 1967. That's when the IDF entered the West Bank, and they have never left. They patrol the streets in armored vehicles, whatever. And they've done that ever since 1967. So fast forward another 6 years to 1973, and you get the oil embargo, the oil crisis. So what happens there is that the Yom Kippur War, which was a war between basically Syria, it was a war between Israel and Syria, really, but Egypt was involved as well. And because of that, like the British, America, Canada, Japan, a few others backed Israel. And so Faisal was the entire Arab world was super pissed. The entire Muslim world was very pissed about the West doing this. And so they're like, all right, we're not going to sell you oil. We're going to no more oil sales to any of the people who are backing Israel. This is bullshit. Y'all need to stop this warmongering. That's also the reason that ultimately Iran gets overthrown a few years later, because the Shah in Iran, who at the time was very pro-America, very pro-West. You had women walking around in short skirts in Iran. You've probably seen the pictures. They were attending college. Tehran was like New York City. It was very, very westernized. Iran was like a thriving, booming, first world country, effectively. I mean, it was a very, very nice place. But the Shah, he also started speaking out against Zionism. He started speaking out against Israel, and that was a problem. And so he was overthrown in 1979. We'll get to that in a minute, though. So Faisal is running, he's telling the United States, I'm done like dealing with y'all. Y'all have been very subversive. You've been very aggressive with Israel. You've allowed Israel to basically just act with impunity and attack everybody in every direction. And we're done. We're not going to sell y'all oil anymore. Find your own oil deposits. And so Kissinger, Henry Kissinger, is, Richard Nixon is the president. In 1971, Nixon removes the gold standard from the dollar. And the reason that happened was because Charles de Gaulle, the French president in 1969, came to the United States and said, hey, we've all been trading based on this, this idea, the Bretton Woods Agreement, that we can cash out and get our gold whenever we want. We want our gold. Give us your gold. So we want our gold. Give us all of our gold. And that kind of started a little bit of a bank run against the United States. And there's a little bit of panic about the gold reserves. And so in 1971, Nixon removes the gold standard from the dollar. And the thought was, if he did that, then then people wouldn't be coming around asking for their gold from the United States. So Kissinger, Henry Kissinger, Israeli citizen, who is the Secretary of State for Nixon in 1973, he goes over to Saudi Arabia to meet with Faisal, and he offers him a deal. He says, look, we're going to come up with a new system now because we got rid of the gold standard. So we need a new world way to establish a world reserve currency. So we're going to ask you to only sell your oil in US dollars. And in exchange for that, we will protect you from Israel forever. No matter what happens, if anybody messes with you, we will protect you, but especially Israel. No matter what happens, we will protect you militarily from Israel. And Faisal, at the time what choice does he have? It's like, what's he going to do? Say no? I mean, Saudi Arabia is not going to stand up to the United States, not in 1973. So he takes the deal. 4 months later, Kissinger basically goes home from that meeting and resigns from Nixon's cabinet. And the reason he resigns is because we've gotten into 1974 and Watergate has broken out, right? And so the Watergate scandal is now in full swing in the United States. And so Kissinger is like, oh, I need to save face. I'm going to resign from the cabinet. But really what had happened is in 1971 is that he had gone to Zbigniew Brzezinski, who's Mika Brzezinski's father. And he had gone to Brzezinski and said, hey, we're going to set up this thing in 2 years called the Trilateral Commission. And we're going to get oligarchs from Asia, we're going to get oligarchs from Europe, and we're going to get oligarchs from America. And the three legs of the Trilateral Commission, and they're all going to come. We're going to meet regularly, and we're going to basically plot to take over the world, right? Like we're going to plot world domination. But at the same time, he also went to a young guy that was his protege, and he said, hey, I need you to set up the European arm of this commission, but you should also have your own separate little group. Like y'all should have your own little group that you do your own thing outside of the Trilateral Commission. That guy's name was Klaus Schwab, and the group he set up was called the World Economic Forum. That's 1971. So Klaus Schwab goes in 1971 at the orders of Henry Kissinger, sets up the World Economic Forum. Zbigniew Brzezinski goes and sets up the Trilateral Commission, working with guys from Japan, Europe, and America. That's 1973. You then get the meeting with Faisal, where he convinces Faisal in 1974 to accept the petrodollar deal. They sign the contract, and Kissinger goes home. Watergate breaks out. The reason Watergate happens is because Nixon is a political outsider, and he's not getting with the program. He's being very basically, you have these oligarchs in America who are like, all right, the time has come now to unleash our plans, and Nixon is not going along with it. And so that's why they did Watergate to him, framed him for it. He has to resign. By the way, Donald Trump became very, very good friends with Richard Nixon. Apparently, somebody at GART was telling me that they exchanged 200 letters in total, like correspondence. That's also how Trump met Roger Stone. And basically, I imagine that Trump picked Richard Nixon's brain he's like, hey, as a political outsider, because you weren't a Kennedy and you weren't one of these guys. Tell me all about how you made it happen, like how you made it work, like what you learn from it, et cetera. So I imagine that Nixon probably gave Trump a lot of advice about how to operate in DC as an outsider. Important. So 1974, a year later, after Kissinger resigns from Nixon's cabinet, one of Faisal's nephews goes to Virginia, and he's kind of like, he's like 20. And he spends like months in Virginia, and he's like a little like emotionally imbalanced. And he comes home to Saudi Arabia, and he's like completely off his rocker, like batshit insane. And he goes into a meeting with his uncle, and he shoots and kills the king. Obviously, he was MK Ultra'd. He was in Virginia, which is where Langley, probably like at the CIA headquarters, being brainwashed. So he kills Faisal because they realized that Faisal was a real problem. And I have the theory that is just my own theory. It's nothing I don't have any documentation or anything to point to say, here's the smoking gun. But my theory is that from that experience in the 70s, they realized that all it takes is one guy in the royal family not going along with the program to screw everything up. And even though the House of Saud has been a good ally for the most part in the Middle East, there have been issues. Ibn Saud wouldn't let him build the railroad back in the 1920s and 30s. Faisal wasn't going with the program. He stopped selling them oil. In the meantime, you have in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, the Hashemites. So what happened to the Hashemites? So the Hashemites are given when the map is carved up at the end of World War I.
And these are the red triangle on that flag. Gotcha.
Yep. Yeah. So these are the guys who got betrayed, but basically betrayed by the House of Saud. Like the House of Saud takes their kingdom away from them. These are the guys who are considered like royalty in the Islamic world. These are considered like royalty. These are the bloodline of Muhammad, and remember, good people, good men, right? Who were like raised right with good values, mercy, charity, like all that good stuff. And so they ultimately are given Iraq. They want Syria. They're like the big thing they wanted was Syria. They wanted Damascus. They viewed Damascus as kind of like this great ancient city that needed to be resurrected. And so they wanted Damascus. They fought a war in 1920 for like a year. They fought the British and tried to take Syria, but they got driven out. Winston Churchill goes to T.E. Lawrence, who at this point is so pissed off, he's like gone back to Britain and is like, F all of you. I can't believe you screwed these guys over. And Winston Churchill was like, what do I do to make things right? Because these Arabs are like an angry hornet's nest now. And he's like, you know what you got to do? You got to give these guys a kingdom. You told them that you would give them a kingdom. And so Churchill gives them Iraq, and he gives them this useless little piece of land right here between Palestine and Iraq called Transjordan. And he's like, well, there's nothing in Transjordan. We now know there's a bunch of oil in Transjordan, but to this day, they won't let them have a domestic oil program. But so they give him Transjordan and they give him Iraq. And they said, you can have Iraq and you can have Transjordan, but Iraq, we're still going to have influence in Iraq. Transjordan is yours, though. You can have it. So then throughout the 30s and 40s, you kind of have like these members of the Hashemite clan just start like suddenly dying, right? And really, really weird accidents, car accidents, like really, really strange circumstances. T.E. Lawrence, by the way, he also dies in a motorcycle accident. And there were conspiracy theories at the time that he was assassinated by British intelligence. So in 1958, I think it is, 1958, you have this group storm the palace in Iraq because the ruling cousins in Iraq and Jordan at the time, they're like, hey, we should form an alliance. We should basically form a Hashemite kingdom. We should just like merge Iraq and Jordan and make one giant kingdom. And we have friends down in Egypt, like Egypt will get on board and we can make an alliance with them. And we can actually form like a pretty nice little like power center here. And that really pissed off the oligarchs in London. And so they send a group of people into the palace in 1958 and they basically literally chop up the royal family in the Hashemites in Iraq. And the only reason they didn't do it to the guys in Jordan is because they had just left and they had like missed them. Like a chance like encounter like misses them. They don't get chopped up, but the family, the wing of the family in Iraq does get chopped up. Like, and I mean like women, children, all of them. They get let out into the courtyard and just shot up. And then literally they chop off their hands, chop off their heads, display their bodies. You can go find the pictures on Wikipedia. I won't show them here. Brutal stuff.
Dude, this has all the hallmarks of Operation Gladio.
It was 100% Operation Gladio. But do you know who the group was who did that in 1958? The Ba'ath Party, which is the party that eventually 10 years later installs Saddam Hussein as the leader of Iraq.
Until he turns on them.
Yeah, I think Saddam Hussein does turn on him. Yeah. So basically, but so he wasn't, I don't think he was involved in that like coup initially, but like the people who were involved in the coup, they were like socialists. They were, which again, like in the Arab world, they're not naturally akin to socialism because you got to remember the socialists are all anti-religion, right? So like there's a fundamental disagreement about like communism, socialism, that, you know, they're all kind of considered socialists. All of the Israelis are socialists. We talked about that last time. They're all social because they all come from Eastern Europe. They're all Bolsheviks and socialists and stuff. So the Arabs are not pro-socialist, but these guys were. And so the socialists, you know, these secular socialists who aren't as concerned with religion take over Iraq. They kind of take over, like, you know, they have like a political influence in Syria. And basically the Hashemites are just killed off. All the Hashemites are killed off. The only living Hashemite now at this point is King Abdullah, who's the ruler of Jordan. Jordan has always been a good ally to the United States because, you know, it's like if you listen to King Abdullah speak, he sounds like an American. He has no accent. He speaks very eloquently. When he came to the Trump White House in 2017, I remember I told General Quassis when I interviewed him, I was very, very impressed because I didn't watch this video until like sometime in the past year. But Trump said, he was like, you and the Hashemites are known for your legendary hospitality. He's like, that's what you're known for. You're the guys who like invented that. And I was like blown away. I was like, Trump knew that. Like he obviously did his homework. And it was like a very like heartfelt meeting between him and Abdullah, very similar to the meeting he had with Abbas, where he like told Abbas that he was going to help them, retake Palestine, like liberate Palestine. And so Abdullah is the ruler of Jordan, but that's the entire Hashemite clan is right there in Jordan. So you have, let's see. So now we can jump forward to, we are at right around like 1980. So let's go back to this little chart here. So Faisal gets killed in 1975. Khalid becomes king. He rules for 7 years. You know, they like strong economy. You see the wealth of the House of Saud grow. I think what happens is that they kind of like the deep state kind of helps them and is like flushing them with cash to kind of keep them happy, right? And they're like, all right, like we're gonna keep y'all fat and happy, right? Because now you have a lot of people like in the Middle East who view the House of Saud and the Hashemites as like puppets of the West because they've been so like agreeable and kind and like good allies to the United States. And so they're seen as kind of like traitors to a certain extent, especially now with like everything happening in Palestine. So this guy dies of a heart attack in 1982. You then get King Fahd, who comes in and he allows, this is the guy who allows the United States to come into Saudi Arabia after Saddam Hussein invades Kuwait. So we talked about earlier, 1991, you have Saddam Hussein accused Kuwait of like doing the diagonal drilling to get to those oil fields.
Yeah, I think he was the one that was in power when I went to Iraq. That would have been around 03.
03, yes. Yep, you're right. Yep. So King Fahd would have been an old man by then, but yes, he would have been the old man. So now his decision, like the official story is that his decision to do that, to allow the United States to come in and set up like military bases and basically use Saudi Arabia as a staging ground to go to war with Saddam Hussein, is what turned Osama bin Laden against Saudi Arabia. Because remember, Osama bin Laden is a Saudi national. He's a Saudi citizen. His family is one of the wealthiest families in Saudi Arabia. They have the largest construction firm in Saudi Arabia. And Zbigniew Brzezinski, who set up the Trilateral Commission for Henry Kissinger, when Jimmy Carter becomes president in 1976, he becomes Jimmy Carter's national security advisor, and he goes to task setting up Operation Cyclone. So Operation Cyclone is when Brzezinski said, "Hey, we're going to basically set up a bunch of madrasas, a bunch of schools across the Middle East to radicalize all these kids and turn them all into radical Islamic terrorists." That was the end game, the end result. But the official story before that was, we're going to get this guy, Osama bin Laden, this Saudi national, to rally all these mujahideen, freedom fighters, into Afghanistan, and we're going to get them to fight the Soviets. We're going to train them how to use weapon systems. We're going to train them how to shoot down helicopters. You know, some of you may have seen that movie, that Tom Hanks movie, Charlie Wilson's War. That was kind of like the whitewashing of that story of like, oh, it was all done in earnest. Like, we didn't know if we taught these guys how to fight wars that they would turn on us and, start radical Islamic terrorism. But that was obviously the plan the whole time. So in exchange for doing this, the CIA was like, hey, we'll fund education programs across the Middle East, and we'll build schools for y'all, for your kids, if you come fight in our war force against the Soviets. And the schools that they built were madrasas that radicalized all their kids, taught them all Wahhabism. This was in the 1970s. So by the 1980s, 1990s, that's when you get Al-Qaeda. So Al-Qaeda comes in 1988. That's when Hamas also comes in. You get Hamas, you get Al-Qaeda. All these groups form in the exact same year. It happens to be the same year that Yasser Arafat declares Palestine its own country. Yasser Arafat is like, nope, Palestine's going to be its own free country, 1988. And that's what starts the process toward the Oslo Accords in 1993 between Israel and Palestine, when Israel had a moment of sanity and was going to have that peace deal. And then Netanyahu, of course, with that a Jewish terrorist, kills the Israeli prime minister, and Netanyahu becomes prime minister in 1995, and the rest is history. But anyway, back to Saudi Arabia. So King Fahd, he dies in 2005, and he is taken over by and he is succeeded by King Abdullah. So Abdullah is very, very important. So Abdullah starts introducing, King Fahd had already kind of started the process, but by the time Abdullah comes in, he starts really bringing like reformation to Saudi Arabia. He allows women to work. He starts giving women rights. Doesn't give them the right to drive. That doesn't happen until MBS. But he does start giving women rights that have been taken away from him. Because what happens is MBS talks about this in 1979, when the CIA overthrew the Western regime in Iran and they installed the radical regime. I think they did that because they realized that Saudi Arabia, they couldn't trust Saudi Arabia anymore. They were like, all it's going to take is one bad guy, bad guy, meaning one guy who can't be bought off, one guy who's a pure believer, who's a nationalist, and they could thwart our entire plan for the Middle East. So we need a backup plan. We need another regime in the Middle East that can be the radical epicenter of radical Islam, and that's Iran. So they overthrow the Shah. They bring in the Ayatollah in 1979, and it's also a useful dynamic too, because you have Sunni and Shia. Yeah. So what MBS says is, he says that 1979 and a few years after that,
you end up getting the Iran-Contra affair, which gets us the weapons into Nicaragua and all the stuff that we're talking about with Gladio on that, which is very coincidence that it happened very shortly after that transition of power.
100%, 100%. And so what's happening in 1979, as MBS points out, is that you get this arms race, this ideological arms race between Saudi Arabia and Iran, where it's like, oh, who's the most orthodox version of Islam? Like who's the most pure Muslim? Is it Iran or is it Saudi Arabia? And so in order to attract all of these these people who are becoming increasingly radicalized by these madrasas that the CIA is building everywhere, and they're teaching all these kids Wahhabism and Salafi Islam, these radical versions of Islam, which didn't exist 100 years before. 100 years before, none of this stuff existed. And all of a sudden, they like cultivate these ideas that they learn from these kind of like far-flung corners of the world. And in order to attract the people to their side, Iran is like, no, we're more radical. And Saudi Arabia was like, oh, yeah, we're going to shut down all of our movie theaters. We're going to shut down all of our cafes. We're going to make it so men and women can't speak in public anymore. Because remember, Saudi Arabia had movie theaters. They had like cafes. They had bars. They had there are pictures that I found in the 1960s of Santa Claus on a camel riding down the street of Riyadh every single year, because they had a ton of Americans and Europeans working there for Aramco, their oil company. So they had like entire suburbs, like developments of just like Western families living there. So the king would pay, like, would put on like a big Christmas pageant and do like Christmas stuff for the families, right? So, I mean, that's insane to me. They had T-ball, they had Little League, they had soccer, which, the Saudi kids played too. Like all these things that were happening in America were also happening in Saudi Arabia in the 1960s. And then all of a sudden that stuff just goes away because they're like, we got to be more radical than Iran. We got to show everyone that we're not just a bunch of Western puppets. Like we are real Islam. Like this is the home of Islam. This is where Islam was created. Arabia is where it's at. So we got to get rid of all this stuff. So that's what you really see happen in the 1980s is you see both Iran and Saudi Arabia just take a hard pivot toward radicalization. Al-Qaeda comes in 88. Hamas comes in 88. You have in 1985, the very first Hollywood movie, I believe it's called, it's a Chuck Norris movie, Delta Force. That's the first movie that features a radical Islamic terrorist as the bad guy. It introduces American audiences to the idea of radical Islam. 1977, you have this book that's written about terrorism. It introduces the idea of terrorism to the Western audience, and it teaches them what terrorism is and how it's ideologically driven. It's written by a guy named Benjamin Netanyahu from Israel. He would then go on to write many, many books about terrorism, kind of explaining what terrorism is and teaching Western audiences how it's completely synonymous with Islam and how Islam is a terrorist ideology. So everything that we know about Islam, like everything that we were like conditioned to believe about Islam, was taught to us by Benjamin Netanyahu as an author. Literally, the guy who is the prime minister of Israel right now. He wrote all these books in the 70s and 80s and 90s. He's still writing. He just wrote a new book the other day. He gave it to Trump. It was an autobiography, and Trump was kind of like, yeah, whatever. But yeah, so if you go look at his catalog of books, almost every single one, it has the word terrorism and it's in the title. It's insane, like how many books this guy's written about.
The scariest word in the English language, and when you come to actually study it and you realize the groups identified in it, you realize it's a made up freaking boogeyman.
Oh yeah. And I mean the irony is that the people who brought terrorism to the Middle East were, the Jewish mystics from the Bolsheviks from Eastern Europe. We talked about that last time in the 1920s and 1930s, and they were funded and armed by London and by Lyndon B. Johnson and, the CIA. So it's crazy. All this stuff gets connected. And so I think what ends up happening is that in 1998, there's a book that Zbigniew Brzezinski writes called Grand Chessboard. And basically it explains, here's the future of the Middle East as we see it, as we in the Trilateral Commission see the future of the Middle East. And I haven't read the full book, but I've skimmed through it. I've gotten like online copies of it and skimmed through it. Matt Arrett, who I do Breaking History with, he's read it, and him and I have talked about it, and he's kind of affirmed what I've speculated. But I was like, hey man, all the passages from this book that I've read through the table of contents, I've read through passages from it. I can't find Saudi Arabia really mentioned anywhere. Like, it's almost like Saudi Arabia doesn't exist. And he's like, yeah, it's kind of crazy. Like, the more you mention it, like Saudi Arabia really isn't featured much in the book. And what I think the plan was, and I'll explain like the actuals here so you understand it. I think the plan was to destroy Saudi Arabia, have it collapse sometime around 2015, 2017, have it collapse. And could you imagine going through what we're going through right now without Saudi Arabia, without MBS, without any of that stuff? Imagine how all this goes differently if MBS is not there holding back the entire Muslim world after October 7th and saying, do not go to war with Israel. Like, stand down, stand down, stand down. It's like we would already be in World War III right now. We would not be doing this show right now, probably. And so the world would be a very different place. And so we'll get there. I'll explain how all that was going to go down.
I know, because I'm itching to bring up if Vegas gets tied into this, bro. If you know,
yes,
but I'm itching, so I'm being patient.
we will get to Vegas, but the plan was much bigger than that. The plan was much bigger than just Vegas. MBS was like, I'll explain how MBS was not supposed to ever happen. He was a god, literally a godsend. I think he was like divine providence, the same way Donald Trump was divine providence, and that's what we're going to get to. So Abdullah becomes king in 2005. He rules for 10 years. And he's considered a great king. He's considered a really good ruler. He's a true Saudi. There are all of these CIA guys. Like, there's so many guys in the Saudi royal family who are like deeply connected to CIA and like the CIA has developed assets out of all of these royal family members. Remember, there's thousands and thousands and thousands of royal family members, right? And there's different tiers about how they're all like viewed and treated and stuff. There's like a social hierarchy. There's a political hierarchy. There's also a financial hierarchy. I think that if I remember correctly from my material I've read, I think the top member of the Saudi royal family receives something like $230,000 a month in his like stipend. So you have the public investment fund, which is like a $700 billion, $800 billion trust fund, basically. And it pays for the entire government. So the government, I think, has a $400 billion operating budget and like annual operating budget. And all this money comes out of the Saudi Royal Public Investment Fund. But all of the allowances that all of the family members live off of, that comes from that as well. So the lowest tier, I believe, gets like $600 a month. Like, not enough to live off of, but it's a little something. These are people who are like very, very distant relatives, right? They get $600 a month. So that's a big span. You get $230,000 a month down to like $600 a month. MBS on that sliding scale is somewhere like way closer to the 600 than the 230,000. He's not like poor or anything. He's not like down in the 600, but I'm saying he's, relatively speaking, he's on the lower half of that rung than the upper half, if that makes sense. He did not have the kind of like wealth that you would expect a guy who ultimately becomes crown prince to have. He had to kind of like hustle to take what money he had and play the stock market, buy Bitcoin, do real estate deals. Like, he had to actually kind of like work to acquire the kind of wealth that he wanted to have. And so he educated himself in like financial markets and real estate and business and all that stuff, but we'll get to that. So Abdullah is like thinking about the future. He's thinking about like what's going to happen. And there are all these different candidates for who he's going to name as crown prince. So the way it works is that the king appoints a crown prince, right? So you have the king, you have the crown prince, and basically when the king dies, the guy who's crown prince becomes king. and the king can kind of swap out crown prince whenever he wants. But generally speaking, it's kind of like agreed upon that the elders in the family, the respected elders, kind of hold court, and they have these discussions. They figure out who should be the leader, just like we talked about earlier with the tribes. It's like the powerful leader, the guy who can provide opportunity for the clan, for the tribe. He's the one who's going to become the leader. And so it's kind of a rule by consensus kind of thing. But Abdullah kind of deviates a little bit from that, because he kind of throws out that convention, and he brings in the 25th son of Ibn Saud, and that is Salman. So these 7 guys are known as the Sindari 7. Sindari is a reference to this is like the alliance of the seven brothers. They're all 7 full brothers. Their mother's name is Sindari. And they're considered kind of like the 7 most influential or powerful princes of like at the turn of the 20th century, of the 21st century, right? And so you can see it's like there's a number of them that are older than Salman, right? He is the 20. He's the 6 of the 7. He's the 6th oldest, so he's the second to last one. He's the 25th oldest son of. He's the 25th son, I should say, of the original Ibn Saud, and MBS is the 6th son of Salman. So Salman had another wife. I think he had 3 sons with one of the wives, and I think he had another one that he had 2 sons with, maybe. But MBS is the oldest. That's the current crown prince. He's the oldest of his like brood of from his mother. But the Sindari 7 are very, very, very important. They're a very important group. And Abdullah kind of says, "All right, guys, I know there's a lot of older brothers who expect them to be in the pecking order, but this guy Salman has remember, this guy died in 1953, Ibn Saud. And one of the last things he did before he dies is he appointed his son, Salman, to be the ruler, the governor of Riyadh. And so Riyadh, remember, is kind of just like this like random desert town. It's important, though, to the House of Saud because it's their home. It's like their home base. It's their hometown. But other than that, it really doesn't have much like political importance, like in the grand scheme of things in the world. However, throughout his life, because he was the governor of Riyadh from 1953 until 2012 when he becomes crown prince, and he took it from just this backwater desert town and into this thriving city metropolis. Because he actually was like a very competent, great leader. He was also known among all of the people in Arabia as like the justice guy, because he was the governor of the hometown. He was in the unique position where it was his job to punish corrupt family members. It doesn't mean that there weren't corrupt family members who didn't get punished. Like there are plenty of corrupt family members, obviously, who didn't get punished. But when somebody did get punished, he was the guy who did it. So like a princess goes to Paris and spends $40 million in a weekend and doesn't pay her bill. She just leaves, doesn't pay any of the bills, $40 million, trashes a hotel room, whatever, which happens. He throws her ass in jail and, punishes her. And he did do that to multiple family members, like throughout his life, where he would actually hold them accountable, especially if they went abroad and embarrassed the family. That's when you're definitely going to get punished if you do that. But also, there were a lot of family members who would engage in grift, and they would do they'd run these scams where they would like prey on the people of like Saudi Arabia, like just commoners. They'd prey on them and like take their money, right? He'd go after those people too. Because he's like, dude, you can't do that. Like we're the ruling family. Like you can't take the money from the poor people. Like fuck you. Like no, we're like you're going to jail too. So through that, like MBS watched him do this and learned about justice and learned about fairness. This guy was known for, like they say in Riyadh, for what was it, 60 the 60 years that he ruled there, they said that you could literally set your watch. This guy would walk to work every single day. He had a huge entourage. It would still be dark out. And every single morning at down to the exact minute, he would walk like to work, and with this huge entourage behind him. And very, very diligent, very disciplined. Like, and what, like when you're a Saudi royal prince, you're not necessarily worried about that kind of stuff. A lot of them aren't that disciplined and aren't, they aren't known for being very punctual. They aren't known for being very like on top of their stuff. He was, though. And he was a very, very diligent leader, a very, very good leader, a good administrator, and he was fair. He was fair-minded. He was also a very, very good father. He taught MBS every single week. He would make all of his sons growing up. He'd make all of them read one book, and then he would personally quiz them on the book to make sure they actually read it. And every single week he would do this. MBS had a great mother. Like the stories and anecdotes I've read about his mom, she was a very, very good woman. She wasn't afraid to stand up to the dad when she had to. She made sure that like her sons, her children got time with their father, even though she was competing with all these other interests, including the other wives. The other wives did not like her because, there's a little bit of favoritism there. I think he seemed to favor her and her sons. But MBS had these older brothers, half brothers. One of them was a Kentucky Derby winner. Like he was a big horse racer. So he owned a bunch of Kentucky Derby like horses that won the Kentucky Derby. So he was very well known, like in ESPN and like the Western media. He was kind of like a media darling. There's another one who, when America came in Desert Storm in 1991, because these guys are like 30 years older than MBS. He was like the media darling who would go out and speak to CNN and like be on camera and talk. And he was very like charismatic and engaging. And so like the Western audiences all got to know this one guy, and they liked him because they were like, he gives us access. He's giving us information. Those two brothers both die right around, I think. So basically 9/11 happens in 2001. MBS is 16 years old. And the way the story goes is that the mother calls in MBS after the first plane hits, and then MBS watches the second plane hit. And he literally says, whoever did this, and then they announce, oh, we found the Saudi passports, right? Like that day, like we found these are Saudi Arabia who did this.
Perfect condition.
Yeah. And MBS goes, we've been set up. He's like, we've been framed. He's like, the whole world is going to come after us now. He's 16 years old. And he's saying this. He's like, the whole world is going to come after us. And somebody has set us up and somebody has framed us. And I'm going to dedicate the rest of my life to going after whoever that was. That's like what he says. And like at school and stuff, like all his friends, because these people have all been interviewed. I've read the biographies from the people who interviewed them. They're like, dude, we wanted to go out and party. It's like we would go on trips. We would go do this, do that. And MBS, like he was talking about politics, like, as a teenager. And they were like, what do you want to, they would have like a big family get together, a big family dinner. And all the cousins would be talking about like, oh, like the new Porsche they just bought, or the new plane they just bought, or like, oh, I'm going to summer this summer. I'm going to French Riviera, like whatever. Like that's what they wanted to talk about. And he was talking about, the Roman Empire. And he was talking about how he wanted to be the next Alexander the Great. That's what he always says. His ambition is, I want to be history's next Alexander the Great. So he's thinking like in those terms. He was offered to go to every school you could possibly imagine in any country. He had whatever the whole pick of the lot. But he chose to not leave Saudi Arabia instead, because right before 9/11, one of Salman's sons dies of like a heart attack. One of those two guys I just described. A year later, the other son dies. So it's like within like a 18-month period, this guy loses two of his sons. They're like in their 40s. And they're both like very, very well liked, like considered really good guys. And they both die. And Salman's like completely devastated, and it like hits him really, really hard. And so MBS is, 16 years old. and decides that he's not going to go away for school. He's going to stay and attend law, like go to university at the University of Riyadh, eventually go to law school. But he's like, I'm going to be with my dad because my dad needs me, and he needs someone to be around him. And he's a support system. So he takes care of his dad and, good son, right? I mean, this guy could literally go do anything he wanted to do in the world. And instead he stays home and takes care of his dad. And then years later, I think it was around like 2008, 2009, almost the exact same thing happens where Salman's two of his brothers, like within like 8 months of each other, they both die of like really tragic circumstances. And MBS does the exact same thing where he's like, I'm going to like help you, dad. Like, I'm going to pick you up and like, I got this. I'm going to help you like pick up your tasks, pick up the slack, all that stuff. Helps him run Riyadh, helps him do all this.
Sounds like assassinations, man. That's what it sounds like.
Oh, could have easily been for sure. If it was though, man, that was a bad idea because not only did it like galvanize MBS, but it like brought him really close to his dad. And so Abdullah, like everything that I just explained, you could understand that in 2012, when it came time to pick a new crown prince, Abdullah skips over all kinds of people, all kinds of guys who really wanted it. And he picks him. He picks Salman. He's like, this is the guy because I know I can trust him. He's a true Saudi nationalist. He's always done a great job running Riyadh, and he is the best option to do this. Then Salman is like, I want to bring my son in, and I want MBS to be part of like my entourage. And Abdullah is like, yeah, you should do that. That's a really good idea. Abdullah really likes MBS, and Salman loves MBS because MBS is a true Saudi nationalist. Later, when Salman eventually makes him crown prince, which I'll explain that process, he actually says to him to connect with the Bedouin. The Bedouin are the nomads. He's like, I need a Bedouin to deal with the Bedouin. I need a Bedouin. So MBS was known. So the Bedouin are like the nomads who travel around and live on camels. There's 25 million of them worldwide, I think, and like 2.5, 3 million of them live in Saudi Arabia. That's the largest population is in Saudi Arabia. The rest are all spread out across like North Africa and the rest of the Middle East. But they've been marginalized for many, many years. If you could imagine the American ethos, the American spirit, like the idea of like going and living off the grid and living outdoors and being like rugged individualism, right? That like our mirrored counterpart, that's the Bedouin. Like they have no interest in leaving Saudi Arabia or the desert. They have no interest in going off and conquering the world. They just want to live their life off the grid. They throw their middle finger up at the government. They're like, we like do not respect you, government. They respect the shit out of the House of Saud, but they hate the government because the government has incrementally taken away their rights and tried to basically marginalize them and force them to settle down and become, as they call it sedentary. They're like, you're either Bedouin or you're sedentary. And the way the Bedouins see the world is they say every human being who's ever lived at some point was a Bedouin. Like every human civilization was a Bedouin until they decided to settle down. And what's interesting is that the Bedouin maintain an oral history. In each little family, like maintains its own oral history. So they have outlasted every single empire that's ever existed, every single civilization that's ever existed. They have survived. So they have this like oral history, some of them, of ancient empires that, information that is in the Quran about ancient Babylon and about like the gods that the three gods that they worshiped in ancient Babylon. There's this origin story that's in the Quran of these two angels, these two fallen angels go into Babylon and they offer to teach the locals blood magic. And the locals agree to it's like a test. And the locals agree to it, and they're like, "Oh, what do you want to learn how to do?" And they say, "Well, I want to learn how to make a woman divorce her husband so I can marry her." That's like the most popular request. Very obscure, like anecdotal history. All of this is verified in the 20th century when archaeologists go and actually excavate Babylon, And none of this is written in the Bible. None of this is written in like the ancient, like Herodotus or any of these ancient historians, like the Greeks or the Romans who like wrote about the Middle East. None of them have this stuff written. It's only in the Quran. And the only reason it's in the Quran is because the guys who wrote the Quran after Muhammad died consulted the Bedouin, and the Bedouin were like, oh, well, you have to enter, like you have to include this story. So that just kind of goes to show the oral, like the decentralized oral history of the Bedouin is like in the Quran, and that history, which was very unique, it's nowhere else, was verified 1,300 years later by archaeologists who went in and looked at Babylon and said, holy shit, the three gods that y'all said in the Quran they worshipped, actually, here they are. They're right here, like under the dirt. So I thought that was really cool. And so all the governments, like the CIA, all that, the British intelligence, they hate the Bedouin, obviously, and they like want them to basically be eliminated. So they take all these steps to do that, to marginalize them, to shrink them, to push them out of society. And, Abdullah and Salman don't like that because they view the Bedouin as the heart of Saudi culture. And MBS is like a huge fan of the Bedouin growing up. So when he was a kid, like he was a teenager, he would have a habit of every single year, you do like a summer camp and you do like a winter camp. And so he would set up his camps. He'd go out in the desert and have his big like tent set up, right? And he'd invite all the Bedouin, like all the Bedouin knew, go to MBS's camp because he's going to have jet skis. He's going to have ATVs. He's going to have all these veterinarians there who are going to take care of your camels for you. So you and your boys can go like have fun and play, and your camels are going to be well taken care of. He's going to be roasting goats. He's going to be doing all like feasts, all this stuff, all catered to the Bedouin. So the Bedouin love this guy. And by the way, the Saudi special forces and their military exclusively recruit obviously from the Bedouin because these guys know how to survive in the desert. So it's like if you're going to go recruit special forces, you're going strictly the Bedouin. And the way they set up their units is that one unit comes from one tribe, and they do that so that like tribal politics don't affect unit cohesion. So it's like you have one unit that's like all from one tribe. So you have some tribes that are very, very like Wahhabi, right? Like pure radical Islam, like the roots of the House of Saud. And then you have some tribes that are like, I mean, you had Christian Bedouin, you had Jewish Bedouin, they come in like every flavor. So when you talk about the Vegas shooting, and it's like, well, why would a Saudi why would a Saudi special forces attack the Saudi crown prince? Well, if it's a Wahhabi tribe and this guy is dismantling Wahhabism and ending it, there's your motivation right there, right? So important. That's just all like important, like sidebar. So 2012, Salman becomes king. Becomes crown prince. Abdullah is king. MBS is brought in as a kind of like an advisor at first, and then eventually he later will become deputy crown prince. But January 2015. So January 2015, you have the CIA at that point has noticed MBS. They're going and meeting with the crown prince Salman, and they're like, there's this kid who like is following him around everywhere. He writes down everything, every single thing that somebody says he writes down. He's very, very diligent note taker, but they're like, who is this guy? And they're like, no idea. Don't have a file on him. Never heard of him. CIA has no idea who he is. This is coming from CIA shill assets, New York Times writers who literally write for the CIA and like are like their mouthpiece. This is what they're saying. Like they're writing biographies about him, and they're like, these guys that don't have no clue who this kid is, and they don't really care. It's like this kid's a nobody. He's not going to be anybody important. And so January 2015, Abdullah dies. Okay. And Abdullah like brings in MBS before he dies, and he has like a heart-to-heart with him. And basically it's like, hey man, you're the future. Like you and your dad are the future of this country. And y'all are going to face some pretty serious shit. There's some really, really dark stuff coming down the pipeline. Y'all need to be ready for this. And so he dies. MBS is immediately appointed defense minister. He must have like expected this to come. He summons his two brothers who he trusts the most. and his 2 other like best friends or like top advisors, the 4 guys. So 5 of them, brings them in a room, locks the doors. This is like January 20th, I think, January 21st, 2015. And he says, no one's leaving this room until we figure this out. He says, our government is completely corrupt from the top to bottom. He said, I've been studying this now for years, and I pretty much, because remember, he was attending court with his dad. He was meeting all the sheiks. He was meeting all the people. He was taking down notes, writing down everything every person said, and basically just studying the government to understand who the corrupt people were. And he's like, I've looked at the books, and here's where we are. Somebody has poisoned the Saudi Public Investment Fund. And we are hemorrhaging right now. We are hemorrhaging $100 billion. What is it? $100 billion every single year. We're just losing $100 billion in like bad expenses. And by the end of 2017, our public investment fund is going to go bankrupt, and our government's going to collapse, and our family is basically going to be vulnerable to anyone, like the Bin Ladens or whoever can step in and use their wealth to basically take over our country. And that's where we are. He's like, we have two years and this is going to happen. He said, nobody's leaving this room until we figure this out. Like, we have a complete plan on how to restructure the entire government. 12 hours later, they had an entire plan laid out of how they're going to tear the entire government down to the very last person. And then they're going to restructure the entire thing from the bottom up, right? 10 days later, 10 days after they sit in this room and they figure this out, the plan's done. They've gone through with the blessing of the new king, Salman. They have restructured the entire government. They've torn down the entire thing, like from a administrative perspective, and they've rebuilt it in 2 columns: economy and military defense security. So one column is like defense, one column is economy, and that's how the whole thing is built out around that. Those are the 2 like major elements of their government now.
So they flushed out their deep state.
Yes. I mean, it didn't happen immediately. It took several years. That didn't come until the end of 2017, when the public investment fund was supposed to go bankrupt. That's when he did the purge. So he bided his time. Now, at this time, this is January 2015, he's not crown prince. He's just the defense minister. That's all he is. This guy's crown prince. Where is he? Nope, he's not right here. Mohammed bin Naif. So Mohammed bin Naif is the defense minister. You have Mohammed bin Naif is the defense minister. Not defense minister, the crown prince. He is a very, very, very deeply like connected CIA shill. Like he worked in the Saudi intelligence like during 9/11. He's the guy, right? He's the guy the CIA wants to be king. And so Salman makes him crown prince. I think that was done intentionally to kind of like alleviate some concerns with the CIA. Obama is thrilled. The CIA is thrilled. They love this guy. They're like, hell yeah, he's our guy. We're good.
They think their plan's going to unfold the way they want.
Yeah. They're like Salman's super old. He's going to be dead in a couple of years. Our guy, we just have to bide our time. Our guy will be king. Whatever. They don't even know what MBS is doing at this point. They have no clue what MBS is doing. Because they don't even know who he is. Like they don't have a file on him. Like according to their own people, they don't have a file on this guy. And so June of 2016, MBS comes with his father to the White House to meet with Obama. And that's at the meeting where basically at that point they do have a file on him because they have like, obviously he's the defense minister. But in 2013, they were like, we don't even know who this kid is. Like, who is this guy? So 2016, he's meeting with Obama, and Obama thinks that like they're going to be talking to Salman the whole time, but Salman just sits back and lets MBS run the whole show. And so MBS at this point, this is 2016, so he's 30, 31. I mean, he's probably the same age as like all like the pages and like the low level people. Like, I doubt there's another 30-year-old in the room with them, right? It's a bunch of older dudes in the White House in the Oval Office meeting, and he's the one who's like talking, and everyone's like, why is this guy talking? And he's explaining, he's like, so here's what we're going to do. Like we're going to do this thing called Vision 2030. We're going to build high-speed railroad. We're going to invest in like high-tech like infrastructure and technology. We're going to bring like Silicon Valley to Saudi Arabia, and we're going to build out like a robust middle class. We're going to completely transform Saudi Arabia into like this amazing, thriving, prosperous country, basically first world country. And all these guys are sitting there looking at him being like, this kid is so full of shit and he's definitely blowing smoke. What is he hiding? Because the whole time what they want to talk about is they want to talk about like the funding of Wahhabism. They want to talk about ISIS. They want to talk about like, why is your family, like Obama is basically lecturing them on radical Islamic terrorism and how it's like how the House of Saud is responsible for exporting Wahhabism across the world. And MBS just stops him and says, I'm going to stop you right there. Everything that you just said was completely ignorant. You have no idea what you're talking about. You don't know the first thing about Saudi culture. But here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to, for free, I'm going to bring a tutor in to tutor you on Saudi culture. So the next time you speak about it publicly, you actually sound like you know what you're talking about. And everyone in the room, like their jaws on the floor, they're like, what the hell did this kid just say to the president of the United States? Completely disrespects like Obama, and basically gets up and walks out and is like, yeah, like fuck you. And Obama immediately says, we need to investigate this guy. This guy is lying to us about everything he just said was obviously a smokescreen. He's doing something else. We need to figure out what he's up to. And MBS is pissed because like he can tell that Obama's not taking him seriously at all. Like Obama like doesn't care about his Vision 2030 and like these grand plans that he has for Saudi Arabia. So then fast forward to November, Trump wins the election. There's this businessman from Lebanon who is really, really good friends with Trump and Jared Kushner. And he's also really, really good friends with MBS. And so he tells Kushner, he's like, hey man, you should meet this guy. Y'all are like the same age basically. And I think y'all would really get along. And so they connect and they start texting on WhatsApp. And the State Department gets super pissed because technically Trump isn't even president yet. It's December 2016. And you have MBS and Kushner communicating on encrypted back channels, not going through the State Department, not going through the CIA. The CIA can't monitor it. They don't know what they're saying to each other. The communications that they are intercepting are like just emojis. And they're like, these guys are like texting each other emojis and we have no idea what they're talking about. And so Kushner is actually getting like talked down to by like dressed down by the State Department because he's like communicating with because remember at this point he's just a defense minister and the deputy crown prince. He's not the crown prince yet. But they're like, you're communicating with this pretty like significant figure from another country. You're not like an official figure yet in the White House. Your guy isn't even inaugurated yet. Like, you can't do this. And Kushner's like, yeah, sorry. And he just keeps doing it. And then March of 2017, they established like an official channel, and they start speaking like officially. And that's when I think they kind of like make the plans for the sword dance, right? So then you fast forward 2 more months, May 20th, 2017. That's when you get the sword dance. And the sword dance, like from the CIA's perspective, this is all coming from like the CIA shills who, hate Trump and do not like the House of Saud at this point. They're trying to paint MBS as a bad guy at this time. It's like 2020. They're saying that when like Riyadh was ridiculous that day, you had like gangs of of Saudis on Harleys, because apparently there's like a huge like motorcycle like Harley culture in Saudi Arabia, which probably is like Bedouin connected, right? And it's like the whole place, like Trump's face was everywhere in Riyadh, and there was like country music concerts, like Toby Keith, and like all this stuff happening there, like rock concerts, stuff that you would never expect to see in Saudi Arabia. Was happening there. Drag races. They had like famous like race car drivers there, like very, very westernized, like festival presentation. And the CIA in their writings are like mocking it, because they're like, these guys are obviously not being serious. They're making fun of Donald Trump, and he's too stupid to figure out that they're making fun of him. But really the joke was on these guys. So yes, like they do the sword dance. Now, what was the sword dance? Let's talk about that, because in my opinion, the sword dance was way more significant than I think people realize. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
No, I'm just saying. Yep, I agree with you, bro.
Yeah.
The
So,
significance to what this means.
yeah. So think about this. Like, think about the sword dance. Think about if you're Trump and you're plotting with MBS, and let's just say that y'all have made it on the same page. My opinion of how they got on the same page was Trump, I think, handed MBS the 9/11 file. I think Trump was like, I know how important this is to you, and I'm going to earn your trust by giving you, for safekeeping, the entire 9/11 file. This is how you're going to exonerate your family and clear your family's name. And I think that's how they've like, we're like, all right, like we're on the same page. And then MBS, everything I just said about what he told Obama, he surely recognizes that if anyone's going to help him achieve it, it's going to be Donald Trump, right? The real estate developer. So he probably like is really excited to work with Trump. Trump's excited to work with him. Trump gets it that he's like a young, smart dude. But remember, he's not crown prince yet. He's just the defense minister at the sword dance. He's literally nobody. I mean, like in the grand scheme of geopolitics, he's an unknown entity of the geopolitical stage. He wasn't even really featured. If you go look at the videos, he wasn't even really like around. He's like in the background of all the videos and stuff, which I think was by design. But that's how I think Trump wins him over. I think Trump did give him the 9/11 file. But if you're plotting this out, think about the idea that what Trump did. If you go watch the videos of CNN reacting to it in real time, they're freaking out. They literally are saying, what is happening right now? Because remember, Trump ran for a year and a half. He campaigned for 2015, 2016 against Islam. He went full throated against Islam. He talked about how evil Islam was and how Islam was the enemy, and and the left went crazy with it. And they were like, you're an Islamophobe, you hate Islam. And that drove all of the left voters into the camp, even deeper into the camp of Islam, right? Because they were already sympathetic to Islam because of being anti-war and sympathetic to the victims of all the wars in Iraq and all that. But this drove them even deeper into the camp, because they're like, Trump hates them. Well, that means we love them. So they're our guys. Like Palestine, we're all about Palestine, right? Think about that, what's playing out right now. So that day, I love watching those videos of CNN where they're literally sitting there. Like it's like this huge party happening in Riyadh, and Trump's sitting there dancing, doing the swords. And then it cuts to like the studio and the CNN, and they're all sitting there like, what the fuck is happening right now? Like, how are these Muslims like embracing Donald Trump this way? Like, I thought these people hated Donald Trump, and they're blown away. Like, they're completely caught off guard, like completely rug pulled. And from a strategy standpoint, why would you do that? Like, why would you show that hand? If you were actually colluding and plotting with the Saudis, why wouldn't you keep that secret for years and years and years, and maybe even engage in some kayfabe and engage in like like we're going to go to war with Saudi Arabia or something like that, right? There's so many different ways you could play that. And the way he plays it is almost immediately coming into office. Oh yeah, by the way, these are my boys. We're on the same team. And that was like an official announcement. We're coming for y'all. We're coming for all of you, which was obviously affirmed months later in November with the purge, which we'll get to in a minute. But so I think
it reminds me of that scene in Braveheart where the guys are running at each other and the king's looking, and then right before they fight, they start shaking hands.
Exactly.
And the king's looking at his guys like, what the fuck? What's going on down there? That's
Exactly. So to me, it was a very, very intentional signal that they were sending to the deep state that like we're putting you on notice because you did not see this coming, and look what we're doing right now. And then 1 month after Trump comes and does the sword dance, June 20th, around June 20th, June 21st, maybe. Mohammed bin Naif, the crown prince, he would technically be, I think he's MBS's cousin, uncle, something like that. Older. He's like an older guy. MBS like summons him in to, and there's this whole story the CIA tells, but I don't really believe the CIA's version of it. But the way the CIA tells it is basically he was brought into like a suite by like security and not tortured, but he was made very uncomfortable like overnight. And they basically like put him in a situation where they're like, hey, you need to advocate. You need to resign. You need to advocate. You need to advocate. And then finally, like after hours and hours and hours of whatever it was they were doing to him, it wasn't like explicitly torture, but it was something akin to like making him uncomfortable, according to the CIA. Could be full of shit. They then like, he finally says, fine, I'll do it. And like, they open up these doors. They're like, okay, great. And like the wall opens up and MBS is sitting there in like this big comfy chair with another big comfy chair next to him. And like the document sitting right there, ready to be signed. And he's like, hey man, how you doing? And he's like super nice to him. And he's like, this is great. Like, this is gonna be a lot of fun. And he like brings him in and he has him sign the document to officially advocate. And then they whisk the guy off and they put him in a helicopter and they fly him to some like beachfront, villa. And they're like, all right, this is your villa now. You can live here in comfort. And they're like, boom. And yeah. And it's like Naif is like freaking out because he's like, they're going to kill me. And no, they're like, no, we're not going to kill you. We're just going to let you live in this like comfortable, sweet beachfront villa. And like, you're good, man. See ya. And, but they're like, oh yeah, but you can't leave. Like you're stuck here. This is your house now. And so he becomes crown prince. There's an announcement made like, oh, hey guys, by the way, Mohammed bin Salman is crown prince now. And so the CIA presents it as like this really like nefarious, like cloak and dagger situation. But it's like, dude, the guy's dad was king. If he wanted to appoint his son crown prince, like it probably was a lot more simple than what they present. Right. That's the official story that they give. So I don't know if I believe it or not. And again, this is all just like secondhand information, but that's the story they want us to believe. So there's this, I want to show you this. I don't remember if I showed this to you before last time, but did I show you this? Did we talk about this last time?
Let's Guitar Spy Operation. Nah, that one doesn't look familiar.
All right, good. So he becomes crown prince. He goes to his father organizes this big the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, which is the 57 nations, like all the Muslim nations in the world, like one organization. That's the meeting he called after October 7th, where he said, everybody come to Riyadh and let's get on the same page. And that was when he was like, everyone sit down, shut up. I got this. Just let me handle this. Nobody attack. His father does the same thing. And he says, November 4th, come to Riyadh. I got a big announcement to make. Some really, really cool things to happen. Brings all the like Muslim leaders in the world to Riyadh, to the palace. And they have this big meeting. And the father says, okay, here's what's going to happen. I'm still king, and he's crown prince, but I'm going to go ahead and advocate my sovereignty. He's sovereign now. He is the actual leader of Saudi Arabia now. So all of you, like all the respect that you give me, and everybody respects Salman because of the reasons I said before, because he's very fair and even-handed and diligent and a good man, all that good stuff. So everyone respects the shit out of Salman. He's like, all the respect you give to me, I want you to now give to him because he is effectively me now. And the first thing MBS says is, all right, guys. So the first order of business is I'm putting together a corruption panel. It's actually already happening right now as we speak. And so some of you are probably going to be getting some phone calls from me or some visits from my guys. But things are going to be run a little differently around here from henceforth. And so like immediately people start getting rounded up not necessarily like all the guys in the room, but I'm saying like other crown princes. You had guys jumping in their planes trying to fly like out of Saudi Arabia, getting shot down. That happened to a few of them. You had the Lebanese prime minister. The Lebanese prime minister is grabbed. They do grab him out of the room, and they basically they force him to go on television. He goes on television in Saudi television, and he like has to like read like a note being like, I am super corrupt. I've been engaging in corruption for a long time, and I am officially resigning from as the prime minister of Lebanon. And the deep state freaks out, like Macron, because you know Lebanon, as I said before, was like a French colony. So like this guy goes MIA. He's totally missing for like 2 weeks, and nobody can find him. And they're like, where the hell did this guy go? There are all these stories in the MSM about like the Saudi crown prince kidnapped this guy. He might be dead. Like there's some sort of palace coup going on right now. Everyone's getting rounded up. Alaouid bin Talal, like who we all love, who's like a huge Democrat Party donor. He's the majority stakeholder in Twitter. He's a big shareholder in CNN. Very important guy. He's arrested. He's like locked up in the Ritz-Carlton. You know, this guy's crazy. This guy's lost his mind. And so Macron jumps in a plane and he's like, I'm going to go see what's going on. I'm going to go save the Lebanese prime minister. And he like flies in, and the Lebanese prime minister is like, no, I'm cool. Like we're hanging out, like totally cool. I don't need to leave. Like we're good. And so weird. But the guy like resigned. So I don't really know what's going on there with Lebanon. I think what happened is that he pulled out the deep state guy and he plugged in somebody who was like more on the up and up. And that's probably benefiting us right now with whatever's going on with Lebanon and Hezbollah and Israel. I imagine that's all that groundwork.
They are not giving them the World War III right now, by the way they pre-position people.
Yes, exactly. But that was a huge deal at the time. Like this Lebanese prime minister thing was this big scandal. It went on for months and months and months. Because even when the guy like returned home, everyone was like, "Are you sure you're okay, dude?" Like that was super weird. Like you were missing for 3 weeks, and he's like, "Oh no, man, I was cool. Like I was just hanging out."
Which leads me to believe that Trump let these guys know that there's going to be a term of presidency. I'm not there. Because these guys they've, like you said, they've been holding back the entire Middle East. You wouldn't be doing that with what's going on unless you had foreknowledge of what's coming and what they're trying to suck you into. And you have the confidence that in some form or fashion, Trump is coming back. Yeah. And I'm telling you, man, when I look at it through a tactical mindset, why are they not doing something right now when they have more than enough reason to do something right now? Yep. And you think, back to the sword dance and all these things. There's a collaboration, man, that was pre-planned. And
Oh yeah. Well, so I mean, backing up, I see people in the chat asking about Vegas. So Vegas happened on October 1st, 2017. We're at like November with this purge thing. So it was a month before. I think at that point, people like were upset about the fact that MBS had become crown prince because he had been appointed crown prince back in June. And I have family friends who used to be Secret Service. I've spoken to them not about this exact storyline, but just about working the Secret Service and working in like security and stuff before. And some of them went and worked, or they had buddies who went and worked for the Saudis after they retired. And they were like, hey, they told me these stories before. They said, look, one thing that the Saudis like to do is they like to go to Vegas and they like to dress down. And then their security will act like they're just like on a bachelor party, and they'll go out and they'll party and just be normal. And it helps them blend in because, they're not dressed up in their garb or anything. So nobody knows that they're like Saudi royal princes. Even if they do, no one's going to mess with them. They're going to be like, you're just some random dude with a bunch of money, right? Vegas has dime a dozen with those types. So I think it's very plausible that a month before he actually became the sovereign of Saudi Arabia, he went to Vegas and did something. I mean, I've seen the theories that he was meeting with Trump or Kushner or whoever. Maybe he was just there to have one last hurrah with his buddies before he became crown prince. I don't know. I've seen all the different theories, and I think they're all very plausible. I personally do think that he was there that night, and I personally do think that he was targeted. I think that whole thing was set up to kill him. and you look at the fact that like Alaweed bin Talal owned the top 5 floors, he insisted that I think that MBS used that whenever he goes to Vegas. I saw there was a story about that where bin Talal was like, dude, use my penthouse whenever you want, you know? So I think it makes a lot of sense that they would try to kill him. And I think that that's exactly what happened. And I do think that to a certain extent, the purge was about responding to that, but I think the purge was happening no matter what, because of what I said before. Somebody cooked the books to destroy the House of Saud. And when you consider that bin Talal like had billions and billions of dollars of his own, just because the public investment fund collapses and goes bankrupt doesn't mean the individual family members are bankrupt. It just means that they don't get allowances anymore, but they all have their own money anyway. Like a lot of them already are billionaires on their own anyway, so they don't care about that. Like the guys who would have been plotting to do this. So
it was going to give them the original story they wanted back in the day. It was going to take MBS out, which check the box. That makes them happy. You have the Harvest shooting that unfolds, and then all of a sudden you have MBS that's dead there. So all of a sudden people are going to be like, well, this isn't by coincidence. This is related. And then all of a sudden you get to blame Saudi Arabia again, like you did on 9/11.
Exactly. And I'll show you this, like that all kind of comes full circle because you have this little storyline where you have here it is. So the Saudis have invested in here it is. So this is from May of this past year. Saudi Arabia emerges as a key investor in Elon Musk's $24 billion startup, right? And it's like, if you read this article by itself, it doesn't mention MBS. Here's who it mentions. It mentions Kingdom Holding, which is Prince Al-Walid's company, right? And so if you read this article without any context, you would walk away actually thinking that Elon Musk was nefarious because the top investor in his new AI company is Prince Al-Walid. That's very concerning, right? I mean, he's a bad guy, right? Well, but we do have context because we've done our homework. So here's an article from March of 2018. Saudi's crown prince has been quietly seizing power over major companies owned by people he has arrested. So when he was rounding everybody up and arresting them, he was actually seizing their companies. And it says right here that he assumed veto power over investment decisions made by high-profile billionaire Prince Al-Walid bin Talal, who was detained in November. He was released in January, so he actually does end up releasing him after many months. And the rumors are that he was tortured, but whatever. An undisclosed deal. He does still remain the chairman of Kingdom Holding Company, but MBS has all the power. He has the veto power. It's the Kingdom Holding Company has a $12.5 billion investment portfolio, and it's now completely subject to the approval by the Crown Prince and his court. He also seized the Bin Laden's construction company, which is the number one construction company in Arabia. So if you were going to, I don't know, do that thing that he explained to Obama, like you were going to do these massive infrastructure projects and you were going to build this like amazing futuristic society, you're going to need like a massive construction firm to do that, right?
Absolutely. And you already have something that's the biggest one that's there. And it looks like Gordon just froze. I thought he was just shocked by my comment. So we'll see if he resets it or whatever he does. In the meantime, you guys, because we probably got about just short of 20 minutes before we wrap this up, do me a solid. Jump down the description. Make sure you're following Gordon on X. His Substack is there. A lot of the information that you feel like he goes into it, and there's so much more, and there's so much more, you'll find that in his Substack. And looks like he's coming back, you guys. So let's just give him a second real quick. So as I wait for him in the green room, I'll take a minute just to plug some of the stuff that I got going on. You guys know I run this content commercial free, except since I know it's going to be a long show with Gordon. We did a little intro or mid-show commercial for those sponsors. For those of you that are new to this channel, I was watching the live chat and saw that some of you guys stumbled on here by accident. We're over 300 episodes. We're approaching the 3-year anniversary at the end of this month. So do me a solid, go scroll through in there, see what you find, see what you like, and share it. SR 71166. You dropping those names tonight, Alpha? Yes, we are. So I'm gonna do me a favor, or you guys do me a favor. Stick around. I'm gonna cut to a commercial. Give me a chance to shoot Gordon a text and make sure everything's good on his end. Probably had a battery die or something like that. So support these sponsors, and we'll be back in just a few minutes, you guys.
Are you worried about the effects that higher inflation rates will have on your investments? Are you trying to secure your retirement savings against losses, but you notice that inflation is a hot topic these days? But how dangerous are low inflation rates on your retirement savings? An inflation rate of 2% may not seem like much, but it means that prices will just about quintuple over the lifetime of the average American. And 4% average inflation rate means that something that costs $1 when they're born will cost $23 when they die. That demonstrates the danger of even low inflation rates. So when it comes to gold and inflation rates, many investors want to know whether inflation rates have an effect on gold prices. What history indicates is that over the long term, increased inflation should lead to correspondingly higher gold prices. From September 1971 to August 2020, gold grew 7.5 times as much as inflation. Not only can an investment in physical gold help protect your assets against the damage done by inflation, it can also help grow the value of your retirement portfolio over the long term. If you're looking to protect your retirement assets, why wait until stock markets crash and gold begins to rise in price?
All right, you guys. Looks like he's got it working, and looks like he will pop in right now. So give me 1 second. This is the good part of going live. And yeah, here's the man of the hour. He's back. All right, brother.
All right. Sorry about that.
You're
I don't
good.
know what happened.
I was just like, they nuked Gordon. They got some. They got
Dude,
some.
they must have, man. They must have. So I don't know when I went out. Like, I don't know if I
You have to reshare the screen too, because that popped off.
yeah, okay. So how far did we get here? Did y'all hear about Kevin Chalker or Global Risk Advisors?
No, none of that.
None of that. Okay.
The last thing that I got with you is if they were going to rebuild, or build all these new infrastructures, how would they do it? And we're talking about how they took over the Bin Laden construction company, and then that's when you got zapped.
Yep. So yeah. So he owns these construction companies now, the investment firms, all that good stuff. He's going to make some enemies. People are going to try to kill him. So it's not just Vegas. There's more to it than that. So here's a story from January 20th, 2024. It says alleged Qatar spy operation said to have targeted GOP lawmakers opposed to the Muslim Brotherhood. So what was happening was March 2017, you have Qatar. Qatar is like this big hub of bad guys. You have the CIA operating out of there, big CIA operation out of Qatar. You have Muslim Brotherhood, you have MI6, you have military industrial complex, you have a whole matrix of NGOs that are operated by ex-CIA agents. You also, and like State Department people, you also have like consulting firms because there's tons and tons and tons of money there. So it's like if you're a former CIA or former State Department, you're going to go start a consulting firm in Doha, and then you can make lots and lots of money from these princes who are trying to get access to the State Department, right? So one of these companies is called Global Risk Advisors. It was founded by an ex-CIA employee named Kevin Chalker. And he was hired in March 2017 by the Muslim Brotherhood, by the Qatari government, to help them because Ted Cruz was at the time trying to designate Muslim Brotherhood as a foreign terrorist organization. So he came up with this document called Project Endgame to explain like a strategy for how they were going to help the Muslim Brotherhood subvert the U.S. Senate.
What's the date that he comes up with that? The Project Endgame?
What's that?
What's the year that he does the Project Endgame?
March 2017. So this is like right at the beginning of the Trump administration. Like they're worried because Trump is talking about he's hating on Islam. He's saying all this bad stuff about Islam. and we got to make sure that we're protected. So help us out, CIA agent Kevin Chalker. And so I want to pull up the actual document because they have it down here. It's a 12-page, it's like a 12-page slideshow presentation, and it is pretty interesting.
While
Right.
you're pulling that up, I'm going to look for something else too. I want to see if there's a correlation of dates here. It'll be pretty interesting if there is.
Yeah. Why is this thing not going? Let me see if I can get this on a different platform because it's not showing up.
While you're pulling that up, I've seen this question pop up before. I don't know if it's the same person, but Liberty is Mine says, please ask Gordon about why MBS immediately put a blockade on Qatar. Thank you for having him on. I liked him from hello. So did I.
Thank you. Very, very good question. And that's exactly what we're talking about right here. It's a very, very good question. Damn, homie. That's let me see. I actually might have these saved. In game. Okay, we can. Okay, so I think I actually have these things individually saved on my computer, so I can just open them up.
Yeah, you just tell me when, and I'll bring it up, brother. While you're doing that, I'll pop this up on the screen real quick, so I'll switch this out. I was looking to see if there was a correlation in these dates. So for those that don't know, Rita Wilson, this is Tom Hanks's wife. And there was a lot of speculation going around. This came from a post on March 21st of 2020. But there was a lot of stuff surrounding Tom Hanks and Rita Wilson where they were taking pictures, and there was stupid Gordon, you still there? Are you frozen? Or you,
no. I was
you
reading. I was reading.
You were so. Did I lose him again?
No.
No, you're good. All right. Well, there was a lot of just like general pictures that they were doing in their vacation where you could tell there was CGI. You know, like a plate going through a glass of water, and just people picked up on this. It was really weird. There was also things where they would take pictures in a room, and there'd be like a barcode on a lamp, barcode on a door, which is, you find that a lot on military facilities. So there's a lot of speculation that Tom Hanks and Rita Wilson were either, being detained or investigated or interviewed by the military. Shortly after all this pops off, Rita Wilson does this post on her Instagram. And I'll play a few seconds of it just so you can see it's being kind of weird. But the main point here is she shows this book at the end, and it shows Ender's Game. And then obviously you see a certain star that's on the front cover. And it just has nothing to do with what's going on. So I'll buy you a little bit of time right now, Gordon, to look for that. I'm going to play about a minute, not even a minute. I'll probably play about 30, 35 seconds of this because it's just weird. She's rapping. So take a look.
You drew a picture of my morning, but you couldn't make my day. I'm rocking and you're yawning, but you never look my way. I'm looking down you, darling, in every single way. Your funny flow is on, and your green comes on the way. This ain't got shit to do with shampoo, so watch your head and shoulder. Brother older, bold enough to fold you. Yo, I told you.
I'm not going to subject you guys to that whole thing. But like I said, the main thing I wanted you guys to see her bringing up was Ender's Game. And there's a lot that could be made out of this for those that have seen the movie and all that. But let me pull that off, and I'll put you back up, Gordon.
Yeah, this is like weird. The it's like they used to have, it's like right here. So like if you're looking at right here, they used to have a little slide presentation, which I know I downloaded, but I don't have it handy. But anyway, okay, we don't need to waste time like looking for it. But basically, it's a 12 slideshow, and they're explaining like, here's how, it's a presentation. So like Kevin Chalker is presenting to the Muslim Brotherhood how he's going to help them subvert Donald Trump. And basically in the slideshow, it says, Donald Trump is your enemy. Donald Trump is mobilizing against you. You need to act now if you want to defeat Donald Trump. And it lays out, it says, so what it conveys, it doesn't name this person by name, but it says in game is actually a reference to a person. And it says in game is the most charming and powerful diplomat in DC. He is very, very, like, he has lots of resources. He's very, very well liked. And he is mobilizing against you as well. And him and Trump together are going to present a serious threat to you if you don't do something about this. And then it proposes engaging in 5th generation warfare against Trump as well as against this guy, Project Endgame. And it says we can use our assets, our Muslim Brotherhood assets in the media to go after them. And he says, here are our assets. Our assets are the New York Times, the Middle East Eye, Max Blumenthal? I don't know if it was, I can't remember if it was Max Blumenthal or somebody else, but it identified a specific influencer on Twitter. And then it also, I think it was The Intercept. Yeah, The Intercept right here. Yeah, so it was The Intercept, Middle East Eye, New York Times, and then like an influencer. And
I think, yeah, it was a little bit below that where I think it did say Max Blumenthal.
Yeah.
Right below the picture. I think I saw it. Yeah,
it might have said, but it doesn't matter though. But so then I went looking and I was like, all right, well, where is this? So this is I'm going to show you a JPEG, like a screenshot that I took. So like I added this text right here, but I figured out like this is a screenshot of a article from the Huffington Post from 2012. Where it says, literally it uses the exact same language that Kevin Chalker used in his presentation. It says, Yusuf Al-Otaiba is the most charming man in Washington. He's slick, he's savvy, and he throws at one hell of a party. And if he has his way, our Middle East policy is going to get a lot more aggressive. So this is who they're talking about, in my opinion. It's the UAE ambassador to DC. The UAE is Mohammed bin Zayed. He's the crown prince of Abu Dhabi. He's the president of the UAE. And basically, he's the guy who went to King Abdullah and Salman and said, look, y'all need to make this guy crown prince. Y'all make MBS crown prince. He has the right mindset for it. We need to go to war. We need to, not this guy, but MBZ, Mohammed bin Zayed. I'll pull him up. He was like, let this guy be crown prince and I will take him under my wing and I will take care of him and I will show him the ropes and I'll introduce him to all the people he needs to know. This is Mohammed bin Zayed. You probably recognize him because he's the guy who went to El Salvador. Remember, like Bukele met with somebody, like met with like a prince. And the guy was like walking in and they shook hands. And there's this big, like, this is a few months ago. There's this big speculation that, oh my God, big money's coming into Bitcoin now. This is the guy that he was meeting with. He's the head of the UAE and he does command a shitload of money. And, but anyway, this is actually the guy who they were going after. They were going after this guy because they said this guy's a serious threat. Now, why is he a threat? Well, going back to the question that was just asked, why did MBS embargo Qatar? Very, very good question. And I applaud you for being well read and knowing the situation. So what ends up happening is that Trump and MBS work together. After MBS becomes sovereign in November 2017, they engage in this very aggressive economic warfare campaign against Qatar because Trump and MBS really takes the lead in it. He accuses Qatar of funding radical Islamic terrorism. He accuses them of funding ISIS. He accuses them of engaging in 5th generation warfare inside their countries, like basically Operation Gladio kind of tactics against every single Middle Eastern country. And he's like, until you stop, we're going to embargo your country. And the UAE is going to help us. Like they're a huge player in the Middle East. And Trump's also going to help us. So I have the backing of the United States and I have the backing of the UAE. You need to shut down Al Jazeera because he's like, Al Jazeera is a CIA Muslim Brotherhood operation. There's multiple other media outlets that are the same, that are all like running these psychological warfare campaigns against our people and preventing us from having like a stable society because you're trying to cause trouble. And so basically there's this really, really aggressive campaign by MBS and Trump against Qatar that lasts all throughout 2018. And eventually they do make amends, but there's a lot of like strife that happens because of it. My personal opinion of what happens is that October 2018, it's October 2nd, 2018. This is 1 year after the Vegas shooting. John Cullen, who's the guy who pieced together the entire Vegas shooting, his theory, he's come out and called me a dumbass on multiple occasions because people will always tag me whenever this comes up. That's fine. Like, I respect John. He's done a great job with his work. But his opinion is that Jamal Khashoggi planned the assassination attempt against MBS. And so MBS murdered him as like retribution. Okay. Which is a fine theory. Like that's his theory, and that's fine. My theory is that Jamal Khashoggi is the son or the nephew of like a very prolific gun runner, a CIA gun runner, and basically comes from like a like a cartel family. But he never really was that into that lifestyle. I mean, I'm sure he participated in it, but really he was trying to become like a writer. Like he wanted to be like he wanted to develop like a voice and like write and stuff. And so he was being very critical of MBS. He was like putting a language out there that like the people of Arabia should rise up against MBS. And that's why the official narrative is that, according to the CIA, that's why MBS killed him, was because he was doing all this. That narrative doesn't make any sense because MBS already won at that point. Like, he had already become crown prince. He had all the power. He had all the money. Who cares if there's this guy running around talking shit about him, like online? Like who cares? Like, doesn't matter. He's not influential enough to like really be of consequence, not compared to the entire corporate media apparatus. I think that he was killed. So what ends up happening, for people who didn't follow the story, is the guy goes to Turkey. He leaves Saudi Arabia and he's like living like in London and he's living in New York. And I've read all these books where there are all these like CIA adjacent people, State Department adjacent people who are very concerned about him, and they're texting him and they're checking in on him. Like, Jamal, are you okay? Like, oh, you're so depressed. You're so sad because you can't go home because you're scared of MBS. And they talk him into going to Turkey to get like a passport from Turkey. So he's going to go into the Saudi embassy in Turkey and get this passport. All right. Okay. Turkey, I mean, you know about Turkey. Turkey's like ground zero of like Operation Gladio and like all that stuff, right? So walking into the Saudi consulate, he gets grabbed by these dudes and they drag him in there. And then inside the embassy, according to the official story, they chop him up into little pieces. Now, they never find his body. His body's never been found. They never found any actual physical evidence that he's been murdered. So he could be alive for all we know. But the official story is that MBS's goons, or like his guys, went in, dragged this guy into the Saudi embassy, chop him up in the Saudi embassy, and then try to act like that wasn't, like, none of that story makes sense. It's like, why MBS is trying to present himself as like a new kind of Arab. He's trying to reestablish, like rebrand Arab culture in the eyes of like the world, right? Why would he then go murder this random journalist who's totally insignificant just to prove a point or settle a score? Now, John Cullen thinks that Jamal Khashoggi killed him or tried to kill MBS, like the assassination attempt. That's fine. It still doesn't explain, like, there are a lot of ways you could kill this guy without it like linking back to you. Like, why would you be so overt about it? Because what ends up happening immediately. So what happens is that this guy who's on screen, Yosef Al-Otaiba, he's running around DC for months and months and months, telling everyone, this is the guy. This is the guy who's who's changing the world. He's changing Islam. He's getting rid of Wahhabi Islam, because one of the things he did is he rounded up all of the Wahhabi clerics and fired them. He arrested 700 of them. He kicked out the other 4,000. They're out of the government now. So he's running around telling everyone, this is the guy. This is the future of Islam. He's the future of the Middle East. Like, talk to him, invest with him. Like, he's going to change the future forever. And then the second that Jamal Khashoggi ends up dead, all of the these hit pieces come out against MBS and him, where they're like, all the egg is on Yosef Alotaba's face because he was promising everybody in DC that this guy was different, but it turns out he's just like every other, ruthless Arab leader. He's murdering his opposition. He kills journalists. Like, what kind of a leader is this? We can't, Lindsey Graham was coming out saying, I'll never go to Saudi Arabia again. The Saudis are evil. The Saudis are awful. We can't be friends with them. MBS must be deposed. He must step down as leader. Like, all this stuff, like full-blown 5th-generation warfare operation, all assets deployed, including like Trump allies, like Lindsey Graham, people like that. To me, it was just so obvious that this was done to ostracize and alienate MBS from the international community, so he couldn't go around and be like, hey, let's be friends. Like, let's do diplomacy. Let's negotiate bilateral trade deals. Let's do all that good stuff. And so that's what I think the whole Jamal Khashoggi thing was. Obviously, I can't prove that, but that's my theory, is that all of the evidence that I've looked at, it says that. And Trump, by the way, came out and defended MBS and said, I don't think this was MBS. I think these are rogue actors who killed this guy. And this guy's getting, and MBS is getting framed for it. That's what Trump said. And that's been his position ever since. So, and I agree with him. I think that's the position. So, yeah, I mean, that's when you look at what MBS has done since 2017, 2018, what he's done is he's gone around the world and he's negotiated all these bilateral trade agreements. And we were talking about this at GARP this past weekend. For years and years and years, decades, the world has been controlled by trade regulations, trade authorities, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. They were trying to set that up, NAFTA, right? Like, they're trying, like, it's all these regulatory authorities where if you want to trade with a country, you can't just go negotiate a trade deal with them. You have to go through this regulatory authority, and they tell you what you are and aren't allowed to do. They give you the rules for your negotiation. And that's how they control, that's how globalism works. And then they act as the gatekeeper for how things happen, right? And so what Trump was doing and what MBS was doing and Putin and Xi, and you're seeing this everywhere now, is bilateral trade agreements where they go straight to the country, they negotiate with them, and they flip the bird to the regulatory trade authorities and say, we're not going through you. And so MBS was going around and making friends with everyone in the world, even after the Jamal Khashoggi thing. I mean, that was a big setback, but he made all of these friends. And those friendships came in handy when October 7th happened, because he was able to call upon all these people and work his contacts and work the back channels. And that's why, like, he summoned all the Muslims into Riyadh and he said, sit down, don't do anything. They want us to attack. They want us to go in there. That's how they start World War III. Don't do anything. Let me work my contacts. And what we've seen happen ever since then, over the past year, is we've seen one by one these countries come along, and these are like globalist countries, like European countries, right, have all come around and been like, you know what? Like, I don't understand why we don't have a Palestinian nation. I don't understand why we're letting Israel do this. And you're seeing one by one these countries do this. And now Israel has become a pariah nation. And while MBS is sitting there and being very friendly to Israel, and, the Houthis come in and they block their port, they're not allowing any ships to go to Israel. What does MBS do? He says, all right, ships, come to the UAE, drop off at Abu Dhabi, and then I will personally pay for trucks to drive all the goods across Arabia and into Israel. And that's how he has kept everyone in Israel fed, by doing it, because Israel is completely dependent on importing food to feed everybody. They can't grow food there. So the Houthis actually had a pretty good strategy of embargoing their ports and attacking the ships. And MBS basically subverted that and said, we're going to drive it across Arabia in trucks and just ship it to you for free. And so he's built a lot of good will and good sentiment by doing that. And he's like, I'm the good guy here. I'm saving Israel from starvation because y'all are starving Gaza, but you would be starving yourself if it weren't for me, if it weren't for him and the UAE. And I think that is having like a resonating effect around the world, where the world's like, I don't understand why we aren't stopping this. Like, we should be stopping this war right now. And you're seeing that happen now. And so this is all part, in my opinion, of a giant diplomatic pincer move that Trump started, because I just wrote a really long an article for the Badlands News Brief tomorrow that explains how we know for a fact now, because Trump did this interview in December 2021 where he explained to Barak Ravid, who's a Israeli journalist, he explained how Netanyahu, number one, tried to back out of the Soleimani attack the day before it happened. And then Trump they did back out. Like Israel didn't participate in it. And Trump was pissed because Trump was like, this is supposed to be your operation. I'm supposed to be supporting you. You're supposed to be the one killing Soleimani. And you back out at the last minute, which means I have to now go in and kill him, which is what he did. Now, I think Soleimani was supposed to be, I think he was the point man. I actually think Soleimani was working for Netanyahu. And I think he's the one who organized all these different proxy groups. And he's supposed to be like the chess master right now, running the kinetic warfare operation against Israel, which then provokes the escalation and starts World War III. None of that stuff's happening now. And it's because Soleimani's gone. And what Barak Ravid said, and it's like an 8-minute interview, so we won't listen to it. But what Ravid said is, he said that Trump told him, that Trump said Netanyahu didn't want to kill Soleimani. I figured that out. Like, he's like, Netanyahu didn't want to kill him. He acted like he wanted to kill him. He said, but here's what I think he actually wanted. He wanted to fight Iran. This is the exact quote. He wanted to fight Iran to the last American soldier. That's what Trump said. And what Trump means is that he wanted a giant war where Americans go and fight the war, but it's not about killing Soleimani. It's about the war. It's about the kinetic fight. It's about World War III. It's about like greater Israel, expanding the borders of Israel, right? Past Palestine, not just Palestine, but Jordan, Lebanon, Syria. Like there's a whole plan to expand Israel, make greater Israel. And the other thing that Barak Ravid revealed is that the day before, on August 12th, 2020, this is 7 months after, because January 2020 is when they killed Soleimani. August 13th, they had this big call scheduled between the UAE, Israel, Palestine, and the United States. And it was for the Abraham Accords. And the day before, Ron Dermer, who was that guy I explained last week, he's the Israeli ambassador to DC. He calls up the White House the day before and he says, yeah, we actually don't really want to do the Abraham Accords. We were just kind of like pulling your strings. Like, we're out. And Trump was like, oh, fuck no, you're not. And he calls up and then he says, you better be on that fucking call tomorrow. We're holding this call and we're signing these things next month. And you better be on that call. And you better be nodding your head in agreement. And sure enough, Netanyahu was on that call, and he did nod his head in agreement. And but he didn't want to do it. And Ron Dermer admitted that. Ron Dermer said, we do not want the Abraham Accords. So I think the Abraham Accords were set up intentionally as like a pincer move to force Netanyahu up against the wall. They intentionally left Saudi Arabia and Palestine out. Even though I think I've always said this for years, I always thought MBS was the one who orchestrated the whole thing. They kept Saudi Arabia back because they're the most important player. They're like the whole fulcrum of the whole thing. And then after the Abraham Accords were signed in 2020, that's when, the moment they're signed, MBS turns to Faisal bin Farhan, who's his prime minister, or not prime minister, his foreign minister, probably the best diplomat in the world, in my opinion. I think he's the most liked diplomat in the world. Excellent diplomat. He was raised in Germany, born and raised in Germany, very familiar with European culture, but he's a Saudi. And he says, your job now is to get Palestine in the deal. That's what he told us. Second that those things were signed in 2020, he said, now your job, start that process. And so he immediately starts the process. And in September of 23 last year, the whole thing was ready. The Saudi Peace Initiative was ready, and it was presented. And Can Khan and I were on Badlands Daily talking about it. And I literally was bringing it up like September 23rd. It was right when I started on Badlands Daily, and I said, CanCon, something's going to happen. I was like, something's going to happen. These people do not want this deal to go through. And just watch, because everyone was talking, the headline, everyone was talking about Ukraine and Russia and stuff, but the other headline was Saudi peace initiative is on the table, peace in the Middle East. Like, this is it. You sign this deal and it's over. There's no longer any reason to have radical Islamic terrorism. There's no longer any reason to have dissent, with Israel. Israel is never going to do war again. And then sure enough, October 7th happened. And I think all of this was forced. I think October 7th, like the thing in Gaza, was always going to happen. Always. It was always the plan. But by doing this Abraham Accords thing, it forced Trump, or it forced the timeline, like the timetable, to condense. And it all had to happen like on an accelerated plan. And we see where we are right now. I mean, Netanyahu's been completely exposed for what he is. And everyone sees Israel for what it is now. They see that it's a problem, and they see that it needs to be dealt with. Whereas a year ago, people didn't see it that way. Like, most people didn't see it that way. And so I don't think any of this is a coincidence. And I think that Trump and MBS are working together to force this out in the open. So everyone now has to talk about it, and it has to be like dealt with. There's no way that we're just not going to like deal with this problem at this point, right?
Agree completely. So real quick, because I know we ran long. I do want to cover something for the audience to be able to hear. How does BRICS play into this? Is it something bad for us? Is it something good for us? What are your thoughts on that real quick?
Great question. And no, I think it's a good thing, because we want decentralization. The petrodollar has been a good deal for us for a while, because we were getting, as Patrick Gunnell says, we were getting cut in on the deal. It's like we were benefiting from it, right? Because our currency was highly coveted. Here's the problem. When they started quantitative easing back in 2008, after like the economy crashed, quantitative easing just means money printing. That's all it was. So they started hyper printing money after that, right? And what they were doing is they were taking the money and then they go like hide it in these different countries, so we wouldn't necessarily experience the inflation, but the inflation was happening. Now we're experiencing the inflation, and we're seeing like the effects of it all. But the whole time it's like we were getting rug pulled, and like the chickens are coming home to roost. But the good news about what we're witnessing is it's a soft landing. If MBS and these guys wanted to, they could have pulled the rug out years ago and destroyed us. And I have friends, mutual friends, people that who believed in this thing that was out there for a long time called Operation Sandman. This is this long-running theory that the Arabs were going to do that they were going to stop the petrodollar all at once and basically destroy the U.S. economy and destroy America. That was like their plan. It's very clear to me now that's not happening, that this is like an incremental controlled demolition, soft landing, because they don't want the American economy to be destroyed. They want the American economy to spring back to life, and then invest and work with them and partner with them to help make this great futuristic society in Arabia as well, and like other places as well. So I'm very encouraged by what I see. I think BRICS is basically just like a basket of different currencies. It's not one specific thing. And the alternative to BRICS, by the way, was like the digital central banking currency or whatever.
Yeah.
So
CBDCs.
Yeah. So it's like BRICS, I think, is a much better. And then like now you have Putin talking about these payment systems that they're developing. They're developing like independent blockchain technologies in addition to Bitcoin. I think all that stuff's good. That's just competition. So it's good.
100%. So what we'll do now is, yes, you guys will be bringing Ghost Space of Patrick Henry back again. I'm going to bring up the Rumble rants, but I know you guys were excited. You're like, come on, Alpha. You said, Jim Willie gave us, two names. He didn't want to say it. He said there's no way he'll ever say it live, but you told us that you and Ghost would say it. So I'm going to say the names of the family. So if you guys want to start researching them, go ahead, and then look to a show here in the very near future, or I'll bring Ghost back, because it'd be a whole nother it would take a while to get through this. So if I say one of these names wrong, correct me, because I always jack up names, Ghost. But the Cicero family,
Cicero, yep, Cicero. Mhm.
And that's Cicero family. That's the bloodline you guys want to look up. And then the next one is the Pacer family.
Yep.
And let me bring up the spelling on that one because I think it's like Payseur.
Seur, yeah, Pacer or whatever, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So when I was talking when I did the last show that I did with Jim Willie, he had talked about these are the two family names coming from resources or some sources that he knows that are in the loop of things that were presented to him. I've heard one of these names from other sources that I have. The Cicero family is a new one to me. Pacer family I've heard before, and that they're mentioned a few times in some of the declassified documents with the CIA. But those are the families, you guys. So look for a future show where we'll be talking about that. So let's hit up some Rumble rants real quick. So let me switch screens, bring this one up, and we'll start from the first one earlier in the night. Comes from Timber Traveler. $20 Rumble rant. Jab the thumbs up, not your biceps. My opinion, not that of this channel's. Yeah, do me a solid, you guys. Hit that thumbs up for me and Ghost. $10 Rumble rant coming in from Rex57. Thank you, Alpha and Ghost. $50 Rumble rant from Breadmaker62. Great show, Alpha. I like this kid. He is really good. Semper Fortis, brother. Absolutely.
Appreciate it, bro.
I know that was cool, man. New subscriber to the channel. Hotep 86 is now a monthly supporter. And then the last $50 Rumble rant from Chickaboom, and that's a boom with Q's. Thanks for this amazing show. Thank you guys for the support. Hotep, thank you for being the new subscriber. Definitely appreciate you guys. This show's completely funded, like I said, by you and sponsors. No one owns this show. Nobody gets to tell Alpha what he can and can't talk about. No one gets to tell me who I can and can't bring on. And we're going to keep it that way because you guys are the ones that fund this show. Ghost, let everybody know where they can find you and what you got coming up, man.
Best place to find me is on X. It goes to BPH right here. I have a Telegram channel too. I'll throw that link in the comments. And then Badlands Media. Check out the Badlands Substack. I write for the news brief every day. I have two really big takes coming out tomorrow. One on the Trump thing that we went over at the beginning, like the whole Netanyahu thing, and then one on the like satanic war happening in Ukraine, which is a little dark, but also I think a little uplifting. So there's some crazy shit happening in Ukraine with war between good and evil kind of stuff, with Putin saying we are fighting Satan, we're fighting satanic forces, which I 100% think. So check that out. I mean, that's the best place to find me. And then Badlands Rumble, Wednesday Breaking History at noon, and on Monday mornings with CanCon. So,
and I appreciate you guys sticking it out with us tonight. Long show, just short of 3.5 hours, but I'm sure you guys were like me. Just keep going, Ghost. Just keep teaching us. There was so many comments in here because I know it's hard to focus when you're looking at, shuffling through the whiteboard. But so many people, man, showing appreciation to you, showing appreciation to your work, the obvious amount of time that you've invested into it. So for those of you that are still listening, the live chat disappears, you guys. So do Ghost the solid. If you had some comments if you had some questions from, go memorialize those in the actual comment section. The comment section will be there forever. And maybe some of those questions that you guys have for Ghost, we can get to in the next time that we bring them on. So with that, you guys, since it was a long night, not going to play any commercial ads here. So do me a favor, go down in the description, click the links tomorrow when you have a chance, share it out with some people, and we'll catch you guys next time.
Alpha, thank you for letting me go full autistic too. You just giving me 3.5 hours for me to talk nonstop. It's I really appreciate that, bro.
Hey, listen, man. I will drink with you any day, bro. So
yeah. We had some fun this weekend.
We did, absolutely. So at you guys, this is the AlphaWarrior Show. I'm your host, Alpha. This was my guest, Ghost. First in, last out. We'll catch you next time. God bless and good night.